Okay, let's try it again. Welcome to the December 20th, 2017 Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. At this time, I would request that everyone please turn off your electronic devices and stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Applications for rezoning and concept plans heard during tonight's meeting will be voted on by the Planning and Zoning Commission. The Commission will then take a recommendation of applications, which will be submitted to the St. Charles County Council for their final decision. The individual items and bills for this evening's application are scheduled to be introduced at the Monday, January 8, 2018 County Council meeting. Applications for preliminary plat heard during tonight's meeting will also be voted on by the Planning and Zoning Commission during the meeting. The vote on preliminary plats is final. Only a recommendation for denial of a preliminary plat would be heard before the County Council. The following documents are introduced as a matter of record for this evening's public hearing and regular meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission. The Unified Development Ordinance of St. Charles County, including zoning maps. The year 2025 Master Plan for St. Charles County, which includes the year 2025 Future Land Use Plan map. Everyone, okay. So I'm going to give you a little roadmap. Well, first of all, let's go ahead and open the meeting. Can I get a motion?
I'll make a motion.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Let me give you a little roadmap how it works tonight. I see a lot of people in the audience. What we do is we read the application into the record. We then ask the staff for an analysis of it and their recommendations. Commission then has an opportunity to ask questions of the staff on those recommendations. After the commission is done with that portion of it, we go ahead and bring the applicant up. He presents his application to the commission. We have an opportunity to ask questions of the applicant at that time. After the applicant is finished and we're done questioning them, we open it up to the public. That's anybody in this room has an opportunity to speak before this commission for or against any of these applications that are before us today. If you're going to speak, make sure you fill out a speaker card. It's sitting right there, and hand it to Sheila over here. Try to keep your comments to about 3 minutes. I see there's a lot of people in here, and a lot of people are going to probably want to speak on a couple of these issues. We will then close the public hearing after everyone's had an opportunity to speak. We'll bring the applicant back up and try to address any of the concerns and comments that people have had during the public comment. We then also have an opportunity to ask questions of the applicant again and of staff. After that part, we go ahead and close. We bring it back before this commission, and we take a vote on it. A little bit of discussion, we take a vote on it. Remember, anything that happens tonight, unless it's a denial of a preliminary plat, is going to go before, well, even a denial of preliminary plat, is going to go before the County Council on January the 8th. So mark your calendar. You have an opportunity to go and speak at those. If we deny or approve anything, you have an opportunity to go before the County Council and express your concerns or during public comment also. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to bring up the first applicant, please. Application. Do we have any changes to the agenda? None? Okay. The first rezoning, RZ17, is Silberman Residential is the applicant, LLC. The property owner is Isaac N. Silberman and Rosalind Silberman Family Trust. Current zoning is A, Agricultural District, 5-acre minimum lot size. Requested zoning is RR, Single Family Residential District, 3-acre minimum lot size. The area is 37.74 acres, and it's located on the west side of Old Colony Road, approximately 275 feet south of Rooster Ridge Lane, and it's in Council District 2. Staff?
All right, if we could switch over to the maps. You've already discussed the location here of this property. It's 37.74 acres located along Old Colony Road. Most of the development off of Old Colony Road has to do with residences. It's not an area that's good for farming or true agricultural use. But as you can see, everything is zoned agricultural. A lot of the residences and parcels, especially along that Old Colony subdivision right north of this property, their acreage is not a full 5 acres. So we did find a lot of 3-acre plus parcels in this area. And that mainly goes back to the old agricultural zoning requirement of a 3-acre minimum instead of the 5-acre minimum. As you can see from the land use plan, though, this area is calling for it to be residential use with a 3-acre minimum lot size. Now, the applicant, if they were to develop this with agricultural zoning, they would get approximately 7 lots on the parcel. If it is rezoned to RR, possibly up to 12 lots, kind of pushing it there with a road coming in and using up that acreage. However, the applicant has indicated that they would go to 9 lots. Their concept plan was a 9-lot subdivision. So we're talking about 2 additional lots. The only other thing that staff found with this parcel was some issues with entrance and egress and off of Old Colony Road, but those issues would be addressed during the platting stage. Basically, we'd be asking for the entrance to be moved farther to the south, and then we'll take a look at it then when the engineering firm presents the plat. So with that, staff is recommending approval of the rezoning from A agricultural to RR, single-family, 3-acre minimum.
So the existing, I had a question, I've driven that 500 times. The entrance is after that turn? And where would it be moved from?
Well, the
That's a
drawing on
That's a
here.
hairpin turn coming back from Highway F.
Okay, this drawing is not entirely accurate. It can be difficult when we're using a device off of our GIS to draw. It is actually a wider entrance, and the eastern line here is actually a little bit further southeast on here. So it's more of a case like this. Staff has gone out there with the highway department, and they have looked at the site distance. I think the speed limit is 35 out there. Is that right, Gary? But I think it's 35, and they were looking. They were able to address it, but right now there's no leaves on the trees or anything, so that's when they would look at it at the platting stage to make sure that there's absolutely enough distance for ingress and egress.
Any other questions for staff?
There were 7 letters of opposition.
Just out of curiosity, how wide is the road there at that turn?
I'm not sure. Are you talking about Old Colony?
Yes.
I would imagine it looks like it's a standard, possibly 42, but probably 50-foot right-of-way. The road itself, pavement-wise, is probably the standard 26 feet, but I am not sure.
The lots on Rooster Ridge, did you say most of those are just under the 5 acres, or they?
Yeah, it varied. I'm not sure if we can, yeah, I don't really, if you look up here, some of these were 3 acres plus. There were some 5 acres down below, down over here, but.
What about
yeah.
those along like 3801, 3809, 3825,
If you,
the ones that are
Right back up
immediately
to it.
adjacent?
Yeah.
I can pull up the map here and we can see if it's. Okay, 3801 is 3.05 acres. 3800 is 3 acres. 3809 is 3.02.
Oh, wow.
They continue down. These are all 3 acres.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Any other questions of staff? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and ask the applicant to come up. Yeah. Would you raise your right hand for me, please?
Absolutely.
You swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
And state your name and address for the record.
Scott Bueller, 50 Hill Point Court, Suite 200, St. Charles, Missouri, 63303.
Go ahead, Scott.
Good evening, members of the commission. My name is Scott Bueller. I represent Silverman Residential, which is the proposed developer for this project, as well as the Silverman Family Trust. The Silvermans have owned this property, I believe, for more than 25 years. The other partner in the development is Mark Boyer, who you just brought up his property. He's in the old Colony Farm subdivision at 3801. So he's the first lot in the subdivision. They had this project, they've been talking about it for years, and they wanted to do this project because Mr. Silverman's getting old. He's in his 80s now. So the time was right, so they put a plan together and came to the county and believed that they have a good project for this piece of land. Just to note a couple things that staff had mentioned. They do plan to do 9 lots for the subdivision. 3 of those in the back will be 5-acre lots, and then the remaining 6 up front would be 3-acre lots, a little bit over 3 acres. So total density would be a little bit over 4 acres if you averaged it out. What type of houses are they planning on building? Consistent with what is already out there, you're going to be looking at 2,600 minimums for ranch, 3,200 for story and a half, and 4,000 for 2-story homes. So price points, you're probably looking with brick and stone facade, which they like to have at least on the front of all the houses, probably looking at the 650 and up range in terms of what kind of price points you're going to see for those homes. They do not plan on building the homes. They plan on developing the lots and then go ahead and selling those to either builders or to the general public who can then do a custom build. There is the design just has one road coming in, be a concrete private road, and it would remain private after, the subdivision's developed. I think everything else was covered by staff. I'm happy to answer any questions. I know you have a big agenda this evening, so. Yes, sir.
The lots that are up in the front, will they adjoin or abut the back of the property on 3801, 3809, 3825?
Yes.
So all of those will be, and the
I
road, we didn't get a sketch of your
Yeah,
basic plan of this. Is the road going to go basically through the center of that property?
it is. Between the time that the application was filed and my engagement by the developer, I asked him to send me a plan. It's not part of the packet that you received, but I brought 10 copies of it just because I thought someone may ask that very question. It's not a preliminary plat, obviously, it's just a sketch, but I believe this is what they showed the staff in coming, forward with their plan of how the staff got that.
You can put it up on the screen if you want
Okay.
to. Yeah.
I also, since he wants to sell the lots and not develop them,
It'll come on.
Yeah, just leave it there. It'll come on.
It'll come on.
Yeah, there.
with the 3 different size minimums, would that be part of the sale of the property? Like a homeowners association, that this would be minimum standards, your 26, 36, and 4,000 square foot homes, even though you may have other builders?
Absolutely. Usually what the county requires before the final plat approval is that the county also approve covenants and restrictions for the subdivision. I had asked that's a frequent question, how are you going to mandate that these minimums stay in place? And that's generally how it's done. You put those into the covenants and restrictions.
What's going to happen to the little strip of land at the bottom? Is that just going to be deeded to one of those lots?
I'm not entirely sure that little strip is part of the actual tract. I believe it may relate to an easement that exists, maybe for ingress and egress to another property. But it's my understanding that that little strip isn't going to be part of the subdivision.
What's it got an
Where is
easement
that
then?
strip on that?
It's not.
It's down at the bottom,
It's not on
Gary.
the bottom. It's
Yeah,
on
you
the
just
bottom.
barely see it. It's got to kind of, this lot's kind of straddle it.
When I say not part of the subdivision, there won't be any homes built on that. It may be somebody has a strip of land that's attached to their lot, but it wouldn't be a lot per se.
Wow. Any other questions for the applicant? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and, well, yeah, you can take it with you. We'll go ahead and open it up to the public, or if there's anybody in the room that wants to speak on this matter, you can come forward now. So just come on up. We'll take you one at a time. Don't forget to fill out a speaker's card, too. Okay, thanks. Raise your right hand. You swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth.
I do.
You state your name and address for the record.
My name is John Ferguson. I live at 767 Old Colony Road down in Defiance. On your map, I'm this parcel right there,
What's the number?
767.
Okay.
My concerns are related to the septic systems that they will be installing, and then also the water supply for the area. I've lived out there for 16 years. I built my house out there, did a lot of the grading. We've got a lot of clays and areas where it might be difficult, if not impossible, to put in a septic system. It's one where, because of that, I would feel more comfortable with a 5-acre size of a lot. Because as I looked at their drawing that they had, I was trying to get a scale, you know, with the setbacks that you might have at the front of the house, and then you have the drop off and back, it might be hard to get a system in there. So that's why I was thinking more of a 5-acre lot from a septic and density standpoint. My other concerns is, having been out there for this time, the public water supply system gets taxed quite a bit. And there have been times when we've had very low pressure. So it's one where if you add on another 9, 10, 15 homes, and based on the price point of the houses that they're wanting to build, I would assume they'd have irrigation systems as well. That's even going to tax the system more. So I'd want to make sure that something is done to the water supply to make sure that we have adequate pressure and adequate supply, especially when you get to a platting standpoint, whether they help put in a booster station or coordinate work with Public Water Supply District Number 2. But those are my major concerns.
Are you on a septic
Yes,
yourself?
I am.
And you're on District Water 2?
Yes,
And you have water problems now?
yes, we have. We just had it a lot this year.
And what's the public water systems people telling you for fix it?
Well, they built a pump station, and it was down near the old water plant. And I think there was a little pointing finger between the design and the contractor. I'll just leave it at that.
Okay.
I have my own thoughts on that. But they've got a lot larger lines coming up along 40 and over to New Melly. And if they try to backfeed us, the line that comes back from New Melly that would come to us is so small that you'd lose so much in head loss that it just doesn't cut it.
Okay.
So,
John, what's your pressure at your house, water coming in?
it varies. Most of the time lately, because there has been a lot of demand on it and people running irrigation systems, it's been okay. But earlier this year,
I mean, do you have a gauge, you know?
Uh-uh.
Because we're on 2, and our water pressure is horrible. We have a Gould booster pump, but we're lucky to get 60 to 80. 80 is very high.
So I can have them come out and put one on there and check it and run it for me.
No, that's okay. He just
No.
curious if you know.
I'm just curious.
Yeah. Any other questions for this? Thank you. Anybody else in the room wants to speak on this, please come forward. If not, we're going to close it. Is there anybody, is there nobody else? Okay. We're going to go ahead and close it and bring it back before this commission then. You guys want to bring the applicant back up? No? All right. All right, commission. Any comments, questions, concerns? Want to ask the staff anything? Otherwise, I'm going to ask for a motion on this.
Yeah, I think my only concern was, and I think it was addressed by staff, was the sight lines getting in and out of there, and you indicated that actually that was a little bit more overlap, and that would be something that a study would be done on prior to allowing the entrance. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
Highway Department.
Okay.
Motion to approve, please.
I'll second.
Mr. Setley and Mr. Griffin. Mr. McBride.
Yes.
Mr. Ellis.
Yes.
Mr. Cleary.
Yes.
Mr. Leonard.
Yes.
Mr. Fromm votes yes. Mr. Kuhn.
Yes.
Mr. McDonald.
Yes.
Mr. Klinghammer.
Yes.
Mr. Setley.
Yes.
Mr. Griffin.
Yes.
It's approved 10-0. Thank you. We'll bring up the next application, please. Thank you. Our next application is PUD rezoning and concept plan request by the Research Park Circle and Highway 40. The applicant is NT Home Builders, LLC, the developers, Missouri Bluffs Golf Joint Venture, and NT Home Builders, LLC. The property owners are the curators of the University of Missouri. Current zoning is A, Agricultural District with Floodway Fringe Overlay District. And the requested zoning is R3B, Multifamily Residential District with FF Floodway Fringe and PUD Overlay District. The area is 396.72 acres, and the location is on the south of Missouri Research Park, west of Highway 64, and north of the Missouri River, near the city of Weldon Spring and the town of Weldon Spring Heights. It is in Council District 2. Staff. By the way, you did a lot of work on this, staff, so thank you.
I'd like to cover some things, please, that aren't in the staff report necessarily. So what I'd like to do is not really repeat everything that's in the staff report, but just cover some things some highlights I would like for everyone to consider. And then also let the audience know about what is a plan unit development and what the process is. Because it's actually, there's multiple stages, and we're at the beginning stage at this point. A planned unit development essentially is, well, let me start back to traditional zoning. Traditional zoning, it provides like a bundle of development rights to developers and may be predictable for developers. But it's criticized sometimes for leading to cookie cutter developments that don't necessarily take into account the land. And also another weakness for traditional zoning a lot of times is that for neighbors, they don't necessarily know what's going to happen next door. Like if your property next door is zoned commercial, let's just say, you don't know what it's going to look like, what's going to be there. You know that there's going to be a certain range of uses that are going to be there, but you don't necessarily know. There's less predictability for the neighbors. What's interesting about a plan unit development is that right up front, there's more flexibility for the developer in design, so they can take into account a lot of times the land and considerations that aren't your normal typical flat landforms. But also what's interesting is there's more predictability for the neighbors, because when you're choosing the zoning and you're choosing the development at the same time, you're really choosing how it's going to be developed. Now, having said that, the process is longer. There's more interaction, there's more back and forth between the public and the developer and the approval authorities, that would be the county council. What I mean by that is there's certain stages to plan unit developments. We're at what's called the concept plan stage, where we talk about the concept in general terms and how it relates to these land uses, for instance, relate to neighbors and things like that. So the concept plan is what we're considering tonight, and a zoning map amendment that could include a zoning overlay for a plan unit development. It would be a recommendation tonight, and then it would go, it would be a recommendation by this body, and it would go to the county council. assuming that would be approved, or if that should be approved, then they would come back with a final, more detailed development plan, the final development plan, and a plat. And that really is where you get into a lot of the details about how the development would really relate specifically. That also would need to go before this body and then the county council. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, in all, there's about a minimum of 6 public meetings that would need to take place before a plan unit development could be approved. And then after all of that, there's something called the final plat, which the staff would need to review to ensure that it's in conformance with all previous approvals. And only then could the final plat be recorded at the county recorder's office, and then development could occur. So in a nutshell, that's what a plan unit development is. So we're talking tonight about the concept. And so the concept before us is, I would say it's a 400-acre private development that includes a couple of different uses. One is recreation, that's existing, it's a golf course. And then interspersed around the golf course, and I would say integrated with the golf course, there is a predominantly single-family residential neighborhood, but also some multifamily nodes kind of tucked in within this neighborhood. And so that would entail about 315 lots for homes over about 200 acres, providing about 1.5 dwellings per acre over that development area, and then plus about 7 acres for multifamily. Now, the developers say they don't even know exactly at this point what the form the multifamily would take. They're not sure if it would be apartments, it would be attached townhomes, if it would be condominiums. So again, we're at the concept stage. But in the end, the concept is to provide, I guess, what I would describe as a fairly low impact development, in that they're attempting to disturb as little land as possible. They calculate they would need to disturb about, I think it's 87 acres out of the 400 in order to make this development work. Traditionally, in a typical development, you'll see people bulldoze off the high point and they put dirt down in the low point and they try to flatten things out, generally speaking. And so there's a lot of cut and fill. One of the goals of this project, as related by the applicant, is they want to preserve as much existing tree stands as possible. And I would say that the preservation of trees they're proposing would far exceed what the county's tree preservation ordinance would entail. Now, having said that, there's certain things that I would suggest that you might want to think about. And one is that there is some concern with potential land use conflicts. And one would be the Duckett Creek sewage treatment plant to the east. And you might imagine that future home sites that are the closest to the sewage treatment plant, there might be some land use conflicts, particularly with odor. Sometimes there's noise, and there's other considerations as well. The second is the Zoltec plant in the Missouri Research Park. That could be a concern as well for the homes backing up to Zoltec. I don't know if Zoltec has loading docks or not, but wherever there's homes that back up to light industrial with loading docks, I'm not sure if that's a concern or not, but you might keep that in mind. Also, there's been a lot of concern expressed about the Katy Trail State Park. Obviously, this is a huge asset for the region and our community specifically. In this development, about 8 of the 315 single-family lots would be as close as 200 feet away from the Katy Trail. Now, those would be about 200 feet away at the closest point of those lots, but it'd be up a bluff more than 100 feet tall. So as best as I can tell without a line of sight study, I do believe, though, those homes would be completely out of the line of sight for people using the Katy Trail, just because imagine you're on a trail and 135 feet up in the air or so, and then 200 feet back would be those 8 homes that would be the closest. And I believe those would be out of line of sight for people in the Katy Trail. Also, circulation and connectivity. These, the streets, in order to achieve this low level of grading, they're looking at doing skinny streets, what I would call skinny streets, and narrow right-of-way. And also, the streets would go with the landforms, so there would be less grading. But because of that, some of the grades are going to be pretty steep. Now, we don't necessarily have to work all out tonight, necessarily, all the steep grades, because that's going to come in the next phase of platting. But I would say, just in terms of like emergency access, at some point, these are going to be private streets that are going to be icy and with snow on them. And when you're 10 minutes back, a 10-minute drive on the very back part from the front, is that, or should that be a consideration for this body? Or is it more like a concern for the buyer? We do have areas, obviously, in the county that are developed, which are more than 10 minutes away from the nearest major roadway, I would say. Connectivity, street emergency access. Sidewalks. What's interesting is they're proposing no sidewalks in this development. So people are, to get from place to place, there will be some trails interspersed throughout the development. But they don't go throughout the entire development, I should say. So people, I believe, on foot will sometimes be walking in the street. And sometimes that works, but sometimes you also get people who don't like that for various reasons. Windcastle, you may remember the Windcastle subdivision. Half the people came here and said, we don't want sidewalks at any cost. And then the other half of people stood up and said, it's dangerous to walk in the street when you're walking on curves because people can't see you on the curves. And so, you have those considerations for sidewalks or no sidewalks. And also, how well should the development be connected to regional trails? You have the exceptional Katy Trail State Park, but you also have Great Rivers Greenway, really a wonderful regional trail along the west. The one connection to it is by a street crossing at the northwest corner. So anyone who would live in this subdivision, should it be developed, in order to connect to that trail, they're going to have to walk up or get to the very northwest corner of this development and then get onto the Great Rivers Greenway, that regional trail. I totally understand that there's some barriers to connection, like there's the bluff along the Katy Trail, so I'm sure it's hard to connect there. Along the west, you have Interstate 64. So I realize there's some barriers to be able to connect to some of these regional systems. And then finally, one other consideration for you to think about, and this doesn't have to be answered tonight, but I think when the final development plan stage, should it get to that point, one of the questions that the county will need to answer is, I should back up and say that University of Missouri Board of Trustees has approached the county about taking on Research Park Circle and Research Park Drive as public streets. The county's done an initial assessment of do they or do they not meet the county's minimum standards. And so should the county want to proceed with that, I do believe that the streets are going to need to be brought up to the county standards, and exactly what that will entail, the county highway department, they're working on that question right now. Again, we don't necessarily have to answer that tonight, but that's also a consideration, I think, at the preliminary plat final development plan stage. So if you have any questions for me, I'd be glad to answer them.
I guess the first question I have is, so we're talking though about changing the zoning
Yes.
for this, correct?
Right. Two things tonight, the concept plan
and the zoning.
and also the changing the base zoning from agricultural to R3B, which is a residential zoning district, with the plan unit development overlay district.
And how many units per acre can our 3B have?
How many can it have?
How many have per acre? How many units per acre?
Let's see. Let's see. The single-family portion is 315 lots over 200 acres, so that's 1.57 dwellings per acre. The 7-acre multifamily portion would be developed at about 16 units per acre. That's the expected. But when you add up all of the undeveloped areas, such as the golf course, if you take that into consideration, it's a much lower density, but I don't have that number before me at the moment.
I meant for the R3, I'm sorry.
Oh, for the
R3B, how many units per acre? That's what
R3, let me get that for you.
Or even what the,
15?
R3B.
R3B, yeah.
Okay, 15, I'm hearing 15 units per acre.
15 units per acre. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Robert, in the report, it says, when the project reaches 100 lots in the development, the second entrance is planned to be installed. Are you considering the Duckett Creek's Road back to the plan as the second entrance?
Not Duckett Creek's Road. Let's see. Having trouble
You have the
reading
one
this
entrance
one.
that comes up to the clubhouse.
There's two entrances, and they're fairly
Right next to each
close
other.
to each other.
Yeah.
And can you pull up a different map? Maybe I might be able to see better.
Superman vision.
They're all going to empty out in that main road going out to
Yeah.
Highway 94.
I can say the one to the west where it proposes to connect, there's going to need to be some reconfiguration of that intersection there, I think. I don't think it was necessarily designed with this number of cars coming out so close to the intersection there.
Back to Windcastle, we had the issue of having to have two entrances with a certain number of lots.
Right.
This far exceeds that for fire, ambulance, police, having to have two entrances.
Or do you see it different than
Yeah.
that?
Well, it's a couple of things. First, what the county reviews is also going to have to be approved by the fire district, and they're going to have to approve of any plat, just like the county would have to approve any plat. One of the fire district standards, my understanding is if you have more than 100 lots in a development, it has to have at least 2 entrances for fire access. And I can't speak on behalf of the fire district, but I believe the 2 entrances that this had would meet that standard. But obviously, they're going to have to approve that.
Okay. Because you got 435 units going in.
Right.
If it's just one entrance, that's going to be a real
It's got,
bottleneck in it.
it has.
I'm talking
2
about coming
entrances.
out of that whole development, though. I mean, you can go out 40, or you can come out 94.
Yeah, 94 or 40, I mean, those are the 2, yeah, the 2 entrances.
I mean, those roads are in pretty bad shape in the research park, too. You know,
those are the
Anyway.
ones they're talking about the county taking over?
That's a proposal from the University of Missouri Board of Trustees, is for the county to take that on.
are they going to bring them up to code, I mean, up to standards or not?
It would have to be brought up to county standards.
Now, in calculating your density factors, are you using the acreage of the golf course?
The density that I've mentioned so far does not take into account the golf course. Like the 315 lots over 200 acres for single family, that's at 1.57 dwelling units per acre. But that's only talking about that portion that's being developed for single family development.
Did you say there was going to be an entrance off Highway 94?
No, not directly. I mean, the proposal is to connect to the Missouri Research Park. So the roads within the Missouri Research Park.
Yeah, the
which-
Missouri Research Park comes out on 94.
Yeah, Research Park Circle, Research Park Drive.
Yeah.
Everybody would have to enter and exit off of the one Missouri Research Park Drive.
Yeah, Research Park Circle,
Or 40.
yeah,
Okay, I have another question. You said this was a multi-level approval process?
right.
So you go step by step. If one of the steps does not get approved, is the deal dead?
Yes,
Okay,
yeah.
What happens to
So
the
you just-
zoning now?
got to keep going.
So when he stays with it.
What's that?
What happens to the zoning?
Yeah, it's a good question.
There's a provision in the zoning regulations that the county council for any abandoned plan unit development, they could take action to remove that overlay zoning. And occasionally that will happen, it's not very often. There was some consideration, I think, for Jackson Estates PUD some years ago, but that was able to be revived, and it's now being completed now, Jackson Estates.
If
Has
they
the fire
kept,
department ever approved a 20-foot street before?
I don't know. I'm not sure. For this particular development, I'm not sure.
Okay.
if this was kept agricultural, and 5-acre lots, approximately 44 homes could go in, utilizing the same area without any zoning change. And that wouldn't need any approval. It's a-
Right, under the existing zoning, the agricultural zoning, it would allow single-family houses to be developed by right of minimum of 5-acre lots.
Right.
Any other questions of staff?
Now, I know that the intent obviously is the golf course stays there forever, but if that zoning goes through and for whatever reason the golf course would become, could it be redeveloped into following that R3B zoning?
The way I understand it is, they would have to come back before the Planning and Zoning Commission and County Council to get an amendment to their plan unit development in order to do that.
But the zoning itself would already be in place, correct?
On the golf course
For
For
to
the
convert
R3B for the property, correct?
and the plan unit development.
The underlying zoning, yeah, would allow residential
Okay.
development.
Thank you.
Who technically owns the golf course property?
I think I'll let the developer
Yeah.
or the applicant answer
You'll
that.
let the developer answer that one. All right, let's go ahead and bring the applicant up. Looks like applicants. You swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth.
I do.
State your name and address for the record.
Brad Goss, Smith Amundsen, 120 South Central, Suite 700, St. Louis, Missouri, 63105.
And is this gentleman going to speak too?
He is.
All right.
Yes,
Raise your right hand. You swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth.
I do.
State your name and address for the record.
My name's Doug Tiemann. I am an engineer with Pickett, Ray and Silver, and here representing the client.
Go ahead, gentlemen.
Gentlemen, Mr. Chairman, thank you for giving us the time to present this development to you. We are very excited about the development. It is very unique. It is very different. This site is very different. This is a project that has been in the making for 3 years. We spent 3 years working with the university to get to the stage where we can present this publicly and work through the St. Charles processes. And I'm hopeful that we'll be able to answer all your questions tonight and provide you with assurances with respect to the project so that you'll be able to support it. First, I'd like to read a statement that the University of Missouri has requested that I read, as they are the owner of the research of the property. The golf course is ground leased, and the area outside of the golf course is owned by the university. So, to the County Planning and Zoning Commission, having owned the subject property as part of a larger tract of land purchased from the United States of America in 1948, the university is engaged with Greg Whitaker of NT Home Builders in pursuit of the land's development as a residential community that will complement and enhance the Missouri Research Park. In collaboration with St. Charles County, the university introduced the concept of Route 4064 Technology Corridor and established the Missouri Research Park in 1985.
which led to 15 national companies and 2 federal agencies relocating to and employing approximately 2,000 people within the park. To further the economic development mission, Mr. Whitaker and the university have worked together to design a single-family and multifamily community that, upon the sale of the land and development by Mr. Whitaker, will enhance the housing options for individuals employed at the Missouri Research Park and attract further investment in the research park and the region. The university has been and continues to be a steward of the natural resources of the Weldon Spring region. In 1978, the university sold 7,230 acres of nearby land to the Missouri Department of Conservation. That tract is now known as the Weldon Spring Conservation Area. In 1993, the university facilitated development of a championship 18-hole daily fee public golf course known as the Missouri Bluffs Golf Club, south of the research park. 2010, the university partnered with the Great Rivers Greenway District to develop a trail and related facilities through the Missouri Research Park, generating greater connectivity and access to the Katy Trail for use by the Research Park employees and the public. Through a purchase and sale agreement, the university and Mr. Whitaker have agreed upon density restrictions and preservation requirements for the proposed development that ensure the land is developed in a responsible way that promotes the natural character of the area rather than detracting from it. By way of a multi-year master planning process involving the university and Mr. Whitaker, the proposed development has been designed to be both thoughtful and responsible related to its impact on the Missouri Research Park, Weldon Spring Conservation Area, Katy Trail, and the surrounding area. For this reason, the University of Missouri system is supportive of Mr. Whitaker's application for the subject property to be rezoned in a manner that supports his development of the property in a way consistent with these considerations. Sincerely, Kevin Hogg, Director of Real Estate, University of Missouri Systems. So, just to orient you to the site, as you'll see on your screen in the middle, you can see the outline of the Missouri Bluffs Golf Course, and you can see on the right-hand side of the screen 4064 and the Boone Bridge crossing the Missouri River. This is the Missouri Research Park. Located here is the Duckett Creek Sanitary Facility, and then the Research Park itself is in this location. When we looked at this development and we're considering it, we did look at other subdivisions in St. Charles, and we looked at other subdivisions that backed up to the Katy Trail that have been approved by St. Charles County. I'm just going to go through a few of those. What we noticed with these subdivisions, Wheeler Canyon, that's a subdivision which actually touches the Katy Trail. The Manors at Austin Ridge, immediately next to the Katy Trail on the same elevation. Crest over Katy Trail, that's on a bluff. It's kind of a cliff overlooking Katy Trail, but it's not the bluff is maybe 20 feet in height, 30 feet in height, and then the Katy Trail is below that, but the homes are cluster homes above that, and then there's a large area that's set aside as green space. And then the Woodmere development, again, it's a development that touches the Katy Trail, and also Bluffview Drive, which touches the Katy Trail. And with all of these, as you can see, the houses are visible from the Katy Trail. That is not our objective. We do not want to have a similar type of development. I just mentioned those as developments that have happened alongside the Katy Trail. With our plan, our intention is to put the homes and the development behind areas that actually screen those homes from the surrounding area, and we're going to go into greater detail of that tonight so you can see the elevations, and we have pictures that will show you those so you'll get a better sense of that. The development itself, as the staff mentioned, we're requesting 315 single-family homes. We're requesting 2 areas of multifamily, which are on about 7 acres of ground. We have not settled on the form of that multifamily yet. That really will come along in a later phase of the project. The reason we were asking for the R3B underlying zoning is simply because that gives us flexibility on the multifamily piece. We can do villas or cluster homes, which are 2 types of multifamily that are at Whitmore Country Club, or we could do apartments because that's also allowed in the R3B. So those are the options which the R3B zoning gives us. However, we aren't staying with an R3B. We're doing an overlay. And the overlay is really what governs our development. That's what's going to govern the density. That's the real plan for the development. And that's something that we have to go through, as staff had mentioned, numerous approval processes. When it comes to the multifamily, at such time as that's being developed or proposed to be developed, we will be back in front of you and seeking your approval for that. We can't just go ahead and do that, and we're very mindful of that. With the site itself is challenging. You have a lot of extreme topography. In fact, when this development concept was first being discussed, and Greg Whitaker wasn't entirely sure that the development would even be feasible. So he enlisted the services of a developer who develops down the Branson area. He's very familiar with this type of topography. And they went and walked the site for a full day. And he came up with an initial plan. He said, this can work. This is the kind of thing that we've done in the Branson area. Pickett Ray and Silver is familiar with that because they've done development work down in the Branson area. So that was kind of the concept plan. That started out, we had 339 homes in that plan. Obviously, we don't have that today. We have 315 is what we're proposing to you. So the development plan has, as we've gone through, has resulted in less homes as we've taken items out. There have been some questions raised about sanitary sewers. We've seen that in letters. Do we have adequate, does the Duckett Creek plant have adequate capacity to handle this development? We are assured they do. The Duckett Creek facility is immediately adjacent to our property. We will be able to gravity flow to the Duckett Creek facility from Phase A, and then the other utilities, the other sanitary sewers, we will work with Duckett Creek in terms of those connections, either with grinder pumps such as are in Windcastle, or with force mains or gravity, depending on what the improvement plans call for. So that'll be a process we work closely with Duckett Creek on. But in terms of capacity, there's no question but that the Duckett Creek plant has the capacity to handle the sewage that will be generated from the site. We've also thought about the stormwater with respect to this property. We are immediately next to the river, and so the stormwater, we don't have anybody below us. We're going to flow directly into the river, so concerns that you would have about something upstream flowing onto another subdivision to another subdivision are not present here. So what the goal in terms of your stormwater design will be to get the water out and into the Missouri River more quickly, as opposed to holding it back and creating adverse conditions in that manner. And Doug can certainly address that in more detail if you'd like him to do so. With respect to the density of this project, it is not dense, given the overall size. It's a 400-acre project. Our density is basically 1 home per acre when you include the golf course. If you leave the golf course out, we're basically, as staff said, 1.5 homes. So we're on a half-acre lot zoning if you take that out. And so the density in this site is purposely being held down because we believe that's appropriate for this site. There's a question asked about the golf course. That is subject to a long-term ground lease. There was a 100-year ground lease that was entered into about in 1992. And so there's roughly 75 years remaining on that ground lease. And the owners of the golf course have about $10 million investment in the Missouri Bluffs Golf Course.
Who has a ground lease on it for 100 years? Who is
Yes.
that?
That would be what the Missouri Bluffs Golf Joint Venture.
Okay.
Okay, they ground leased that from the University of Missouri.
Oh,
And that is not synonymous with Greg Whitaker. Greg Whitaker has
Family.
has an interest in that,
Yeah.
but he's only one family member. He does not have a controlling vote. So that golf course is very much going to remain. It is a $10 million investment, and they are very mindful of what's going on with this development and what's proposed, and that nothing that happens with this development impair that investment, because that's something that is a long-term investment that they are going to remain committed to. As part of the lease with the University of Missouri, it must be a public golf course. I think that was a question that had been raised in one of the letters that I saw as well. So I wanted to make sure that I addressed that also. This is a concept plan that was originally developed for the property. There've been refinements from it, but basically this gives you the general idea of what we're doing. The perimeters of this site with respect to trees are being preserved. We're leaving those alone. We're going to get into the slopes and talk about that, but the development is taking place in this more interior area on the site. This lake it currently exists, is remaining undisturbed. We're not doing anything with respect to that lake. This area here is an area that's along 4064, and it will not be disturbed. Neither will this area. It's not part of our project, but this area is being set aside. It's about an 11-acre area as a non-disturbance area. One of the concerns that we've heard from folks is that they're going to come across the bridge and they're going to see a bunch of houses, and that's going to change that view as you come across on 4064. So we're making sure that doesn't happen by preserving that area along 4064 and leaving that alone. So there's another area that I'm going to talk about later. That's the spur area, the spur trail, that there have been some questions about, and I'll get into that in a little bit. With respect to our phasing plan, we have submitted a phasing plan for this development. We have a 7-year takedown with the University of Missouri under our contract. We anticipate the build-out of this project at the earliest would be 12 years, probably more like 15 years. I can tell you Whitmore wasn't fully built out. It took 20 years. Whitmore has 690 dwellings in it on about the same amount of acreage. So the density of Whitmore and this would be roughly equivalent, and that took 20 years. Whitmore was a lot of custom home builders, and that is the concept at this point with respect to this development, is that you have a lot of custom homes. And in particular, we think that will happen because this site is challenging. I mean, there's a lot of topography, there's a lot of grade, so it's different than what you would see in, your tract subdivision or what's happened in the Golden Triangle, that kind of thing. And so we expect that will, and also the lots being heavily wooded, we think that's going to attract a lot more custom home builders, and we're excited about that. The question was raised about our phasing and how we're going to handle traffic to make sure that we complied with the fire department regulations. We are providing for 2 entrances to the site. We're going to start with the entrance at the top of your screen that is where that kind of node of roads is coming together. And that will be our entrance into Phase A, which is the area in yellow, and Phase B, which is the area in blue. We'll start there. When we reach 100 homes, we will then stop. So whatever we plat, if it reaches 100 homes, we then stop. And we'll go over to the east, and we have a second entrance coming off of where the clubhouse is. So we'll have 2 separate entrances into the project, as is required by the fire district regulations. We will develop along that eastern spine for 100 lots, and then at that point, we will connect the roads so we have connectivity throughout the development, because we understand that's a requirement, and we are going to obviously abide by it, because the fire department, it is a regulation. So we've planned for that, and that's how we will handle that access. With respect to the tree preservation on the site, we are doing a lot of things to make sure that we don't grade this site in a traditional manner. When you do a traditional subdivision and you have to create 50-foot wide rights-of-way and streets that are 26 feet of pavement, that causes a lot of grading. It also creates a design speed of those roads of 40 to 50 miles an hour, depending. That's really fast. We don't want to have that happen. We want to control traffic, and the best way to control traffic is with your street design. We have done this in some other subdivisions where the streets have been 20 feet of pavement. I know you're asking that question. They've worked very well in terms of controlling traffic. We've compared those subdivisions to traditional subdivisions and noted how do people drive, what's the speed in those subdivisions. We've compared Whitmore to Newtown and the traffic in those two. We put traffic counters down, we put speed signs, controls down to see what people are driving. In Whitmore, it was around 40 to 45. In Newtown, it was around 20. That's why we want the narrower street in terms of controlling traffic. We know it works. The other reason that we want to do that is because we don't want to grade the site extensively. That's really important to preserve this site. That is a design principle for this site. So if you look at that tree preservation map, the areas in gray along the roads, that's the area that we're grading. We're not planning to grade beyond that other than what would be necessary to put a home in on a particular lot. But the result of the development grading, which is what the county ordinance focuses on, 15% of the site, of the overall site, is what we would be grading. If you take out the golf course and say, hey, that doesn't count, we're only going to look at the area you're developing, then we'd be grading 29% of the site. We think that we should get credit for the golf course. It is part of our development, and it's a set-aside green space, just the same as the Crest Over Katy Trail or cluster home development. But those are our numbers in terms of grading. And in terms of the treed areas, we also looked at the forested areas. And we said, how much of the treed areas in the forest canopy are we removing? And that amount is only 23% of the area containing trees. So as a result, 77% of the forested area is remaining untouched on this site. And those are pretty significant numbers. That's not something that you would see in a typical development. And we're achieving that really by virtue of some things we're doing with street design. I want to mention two things about the project that are important as well. On the right-hand side of the screen, this says northeast corner, and that's a mistake. It should say southeast corner. I apologize for that. We'll get the slide corrected for the next meeting. But that is the area along 4061 and 4064. And we've outlined that in red. That's roughly an 11.25 acre tract of ground. That will not be disturbed. That is that area that we're leaving alone. There will be no grading, no kind of land disturbance in that area at all. The area on the left, which is in the southwest corner of the site, again, the slide is incorrect in that, that's not part of our development. That is the area that contains that spur trail to the Katy Trail, coming off of Duckett Creek. And when we did the legal description for the zoning, we took the legal description that the university gave us of all of the land they owned. And this tract was included in that. When we did our plan, we didn't include that tract. We're not buying that tract. So it's carved out and not part of our development. It is not part of our development. I will be, if we receive a favorable recommendation, the letter is already prepared, submitting a letter to the county council asking that the legal description be amended to remove that acreage from the rezoning, because it's not part of our development. We will have no impact on that, and our plan doesn't show us as impacting it. We also just want to make clear that we're not rezoning it either. So that's something that we'll do to clear that up. I think that is one of the reasons why we were receiving some letters talking about our impacting the Katy Trail, because they thought we were going to be doing something with this spur trail, that was part of our development. And I just want to categorically clear that up, that it is not part of our development, and we're not going to be impacting that spur trail. We are also, incidentally, 100 feet. The lots that back up to that spur trail, they're 100 feet above it. So there's 100 feet of fall between the lots on the western side of the development going down to that spur trail. So it's some pretty severe relief. So this is the property that's not being developed in this project. This is that 11-acre area that I talked about. And what you can see, I took these pictures this morning. You can see that's 4064, and that hill and knoll and in the back of the picture, that's the area that adjoins 4064 and will remain. Our development takes place behind that and below it. And we'll have some more exhibits that will show you that and illustrate it, but that buffer will remain in place. This is an elevation exhibit that we prepared, and this is to try and explain how our elevations are working on this site. So the different colors are showing the elevation from the lowest to the highest. So the red elevation, that's where the Katy Trail is. okay, at the bottom of that exhibit. And that is at a 440-foot elevation, okay? Our development, in contrast, as you go up, it goes from, 25, is it 25 or 15? 25. 25-foot increments, each one of these jumps. So you go from the red, then to the yellow, then to the green, and then to the blue, and then to the purple. The purple is the highest elevation. So when you, on the Katy Trail, you're at a 440-foot elevation. Our development, those lots along the at the bottom there, they're at a 600 to 615-foot elevation. So the Katy Trail is, substantially below them, at least, 160 feet. So roughly a 14-story building below that, and below that. Again, if you look along 4064, what you'll notice, that elevation, the blue there, that's roughly at about a 590-foot elevation, and then it's going down to where that orange is, that's in the 440-foot elevation. So those are the lots, the backs of those lots and the lots in the street are below that elevation of that hill on 4064. So, as a result, plus that hill is heavily wooded, the trees are as much as 50 feet high, we're fairly confident that there's not going to be visual impact as you come across the bridge and as you're looking across to the development. Nor will you be able to see this development if you're on the Katy Trail for the same reasons that Robert talked about. Your angle isn't going to work, and I'll give you some more detail with respect to that. Katy Trail is 175 feet from the development in one place, 155 feet from these lots that are up on the cliff, and then 685 feet from the development as you move to the east. That ground that those arrows are pointing to, that's Department of Conservation ground. Not owned by the University of Missouri, nor will it be purchased by the developer. So that conservation ground will remain undisturbed in the state that it currently is in. So we've done some cross elevations again to try and illustrate what people are going to see. So we've got 3 of those. Cross elevation A, which is looking from the east to the west. Cross elevation B, which is looking from the south to the north. And then cross elevation C, again looking from the south to the north. The B and C elevations are to give you a sense of looking up from the Katy Trail. What would you see? The A elevation, again, to give you that sense of what would you see from elevations with respect to 4064. So, with respect to elevation, the elevation AA, that cross section, you can see on the right-hand side is the highway. It's basically a 550-foot elevation. There's a hill that goes up. That was the hill I've been showing you pictures of. That's undisturbed common ground. That goes up to about an elevation of 585 feet or so. And then obviously there are trees above that that are fully mature trees, 40, 50 feet in height. And then that undisturbed common ground slopes off severely. Our property line is roughly a 490-foot elevation. So you've dropped down substantially, and then it'll come back up, and then there's our proposed road that is at a roughly a 520, 530-foot elevation. So as a result, those homes in that part of the development, they're not going to be able to be seen from 4064. These are pictures, again, of what do you see when you enter St. Charles as you're driving on 4064. This is what you would view as you drive along. And as you leave the Research Park and you go east from Research Park Drive, this is the view, and these are the that you would see as you're driving away. Now, I think, again, what's important is if you look in the back behind the trucks and the cars, that's that undisturbed area, so which is going to remain and not be impacted at all. With respect to the cross-section BB, which is from the Katy Trail, the one that was the furthest east, again, what you're seeing is the Katy Trail down at a 460-foot elevation. Then our development doesn't start our property line until about a 470-foot elevation. Then we go up a slope to about a 515-foot elevation. And then behind that is a proposed road. So again, this is something set back a significant distance, and this is what you see. That is Missouri Department of Conservation ground, and again, I was on that today. That's the ground basically where the slope severely drops off, so I was kind of standing on it as close as I dared, and looking back up at the trees. And so our development happens behind that. And so again, we believe that's going to form a substantial buffer from the Katy Trail. This is the cross-section CC that shows the view from the Katy Trail to the top of our development, those 8 lots that you saw on the plan. Those are at a about 615 elevation, 600-foot elevation. Katy Trail's down at about a 460-foot elevation. So it's about 140 feet of drop. Again, about a 14-story building. It's really a severe drop and drop off. And this is the picture that I took this morning, standing as close to the cliff as I dared. And that's looking down at the Katy Trail. And again, there's land behind that sloping up, and then so we don't believe with the angle that we're even going to be visible there from the Katy Trail. I'd like to talk a little bit about street design, and Doug is going to spend time with that again. That's a very important part of our development. In terms of the street design, we did look at some approved guides for this. AASHTO is the Bible for street design. It's the Highway Transportation Organization that comes up with street designs for roadways. They have a special guide, AASHTO 1984, which is specifically a policy and geometric design of highways and streets that are in severe topography areas, like this. And we also looked at the National Park Service. They have a design criteria as well for, again, areas that you'd see like this, so that we design the streets meeting those criteria. Now, that will result in some changes in terms of radius of curves, street slopes, and something called the K-value, which Doug will understand and can certainly share with you, and we'll walk you through that. Again, the idea behind this is to hold the design speed to around 20 miles an hour. So Doug, I'll let you.
Why don't you hold on just a second? Let's see if there's any questions for Mr. Goss. Any questions from the commission? Okay.
He'll be here.
I know.
I'll address them all.
Yeah, you might forget, though. It's the, that was a lot of information, so. Go ahead, Roger.
On the second proposed entrance, which is now the entrance to the clubhouse,
Yes.
in your negotiations with the University of Missouri system, have you discussed a permanent easement for that ground, that entrance which would be going across the leased property?
No, we're acquiring that. That will be owned in fee. So that will be part of the development. We will own that.
The parking lot,
Yeah, we'll own our access. That road will be owned in fee. It will not be leased.
all the way out to?
Yeah, all the way out to Research Park Circle. And one of the things I wanted to mention that I think was a little bit unclear in what staff had presented to you is what the university has presented in their petition to the county to transfer jurisdiction of the Research Park Circle and Research Park Drive. That's really independent of this development. They plan to do that regardless, and to make those public streets. Chairman asked, are they going to bring those up to county standards? Absolutely. And they have to do that. They understand that. And so they're going through a process now with County Highway to identify any deficiencies in those streets. They're 30-year-old streets. So they recognize, we had a meeting last night at the Missouri Bluffs with a number of the tenants that the university put together, so that we could talk to tenants of the Research Park and try and understand their concerns. And we talked about those streets, and the university said, we're moving forward with this. We want to get these streets brought up to county standards and finalize them so that they're meeting those standards, and ask the county to accept those for public maintenance. But that's something that will be before the council. It's not part of this application, but it is our anticipation that they will be accepted as part of the public domain.
Okay.
The the streets in the development, will those be public or private?
No, those will be private, and so the homeowners association will maintain those, which is similar to a number of other developments that we've been involved in. And in part, that's a function of our choosing to design these streets in a manner that's different than a public street. We aren't designing them as wide, we're not flattening them out as much, and so we're not turning those over to the county. We understand that's not the county criteria for that. So those will remain maintained by the homeowners association.
I have one more, the infamous question, will there be a gate of any kind?
No. No, I'm leaving that to another subdivision, so. No, we will not have a gate. Did
Mr.
you,
Klinghammer,
it looked like you had a question.
did you have a question?
Yep. You said that they're going to be private streets, they're not going to be built to the county specs. In previous meetings, you've argued against the county even inspecting those. What are we looking at?
We
as far
fully
as-
anticipate the county will inspect them. We anticipate that we will, in terms of the street construction itself, in terms of rock base and concrete or asphalt, we're going to meet the county standards. We
Okay.
do not want to design or install a street. There's a development that, I'm not going to say the name of it, but it's in western St. Charles County where there were gravel streets and the developer put a light asphalt overlay on it, and it was a mess because they just tore it all up. We are not going to do that. So absolutely, we're more
We're
than
not
happy
going to have
to.
arguments about that later on.
No. We're more than happy to have the county inspect them and go through that process. I think I also said at those meetings that I always found the inspections beneficial. It's one of the reasons why I didn't develop ever in a county to the north of us.
Yep.
So I found the county inspection process useful.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to address it or if Doug does. Guest parking on these narrow streets.
We're going to get to that. We've
Okay.
designed a guest parking plan, so we will address that as well. That was a question you had raised.
Yep.
So we're prepared to do that.
And then you said that the connectivity to the spur trail isn't really planned in this because of the elevation changes. Can you talk a little bit more about, I mean, obviously, we got the Katy Trail, hugely attractive.
Right.
How are people going to be able to access either the spur trail or directly to the Katy? Have you,
Well, to get to the Katy, I honestly don't see it be really difficult. It's possible if the Conservation Department on the Far East allowed something to be a trail to put in, it's possible you could do that, but that topography is pretty severe. I know you can't do it for most of our southern boundary just because it's a cliff. The area on the west, to the spur trail, again, we're not planning that. We know that we're really sensitive to this issue, and we understand there are people on both sides of it. I believe Great Rivers Greenway, I think it's their trail. I think they're the ones who put it in. We would be more than happy to sit down and talk with them, and if it's their desire that we figure out some way to connect to it, happy to have those discussions. But at this point, it's not our property, and we're not including that in the development, but we're certainly open to the conversation. But in terms of something that we're doing or proposing here tonight to impact that trail, we are not. But we're certainly happy to have the conversation if they want to have it.
okay.
Thank you. Go ahead, Doug. Good evening. I'm going to talk a little bit about streets. We've talked about it several times about the trees, so I'm not going to hit much on that. But what we are proposing to do is they are going to be private streets. We are going to request a number of waivers from the standards. We're going to request that right-of-ways be reduced from 42 feet to 30 feet. We're also requesting that, like, the radiuses on curves be reduced to 150 feet. We're requesting that the pavement, when we have a 20-foot wide pavement, we're going to have 5-foot shoulders on those pavements. We are not going to have curb and gutters. The water's going to shed off the street and go to ditches, and then it will go between the houses down the slopes, because most of these roads, as you see, run along the ridges that are existing out there. So we will have a road that will be graded and we have a corridor for that road. We've asked for a 15-foot setback from the right-of-way for our homes. So our homes are going to be located very close to the roadway, and that is to keep the homes up there so they are not down in the bottom of the lots. They're not disturbing the trees. They're staying up close to the roadways. We will have garage setbacks that are greater than that, so it will allow parking in driveways that will be able to park on the road or park in the driveways and won't be a conflict with the roadways. So we are going to have homes that are going to be closer to the road, and therefore that preserves a lot of those trees, keeps everything tight, keeps our speeds down. We're also going to be asking for reduced cul-de-sacs from 55 to 45 feet. We are going to have we've got areas designated that I'll show you later. We've marked about 176 areas that we're going to designate for guest parking. Those are parallel areas that we put alongside the road. You'll see them later in the plan.
Now, when we do that, we widen the road, okay, another 7 feet, so that guest parking can be put in there, this parallel parking. So the road would be like 27 feet wide to allow for that parking.
Correct. It'll flare out, and that'll be the area. We've picked areas.
I'm just imagining Christmas parties that are coming up. Houses that are 15 feet off of the road.
Okay.
I don't know where anybody's gonna, a truck's almost 20 feet long, so
That's why we're setting back the garages 25 feet, which is
Okay.
greater than your setback under your zoning code. So anytime that we have a front entry garage, we're going to require that garage to be set back 25 feet. We may have instances where we have side entry or rear entry garages, and that's not going to be the same issue. But, we are mindful of what we had discussed the other day, so it will be a requirement. With any kind of front entry garage, we're pushing that back 25 feet, which would meet or exceed the county requirement.
While we're just talking about that, I just took some measurements so we can visualize this. From that wall to that wall's exactly 42 feet. And the first anticipated waiver, you wanted to go from the current ordinance from 42 to 30 feet. So that would be from house to house? Is that how I read that? No.
No, that would be the corridor for the right-of-way. The
Okay.
right-of-way would be 30 feet, then the house would set back an additional 15 feet from the right-of-way, but the garage would set back another 10 feet. 10
Okay.
feet, 15, and then 10 more, so 25 feet. So that's going to be, you're going to have a 30-foot road or right-of-way corridor with a 20-foot road in it. So you're going to have 5 feet before 5 feet, and then you're going to have 25 feet, so you're going to have a 30-foot driveway.
Right. Well, I understand the rationale from going from 26 to 20, but I also measured from that wall to just on the other side of Roger, this side of the American flag, measures 20 feet, which seems, going to Mike's concern,
I can slam dunk that.
traffic and parking. Sorry?
I can slam dunk from here.
What you'd find in street design.
So I'm trying to visualize a more narrow street, and I know there are.
If you would go to older communities, if you went to Webster Groves or Kirkwood, those are 20-foot wide streets. And, the 26-foot wide pavement as a street, that didn't become the design until the interstate highway system went in. That really was not used. And what happened was they put in the interstate highway system, and the local engineers said, well, gee, this is great. Traffic really flows. We want that for our local streets. Now, what happens when you do that is that your traffic drives a lot faster because the design speed is at 40 to 50 miles an hour.
Well, the older roads were designed with very narrow cars, if you find it.
Well, the cars are the same size. I mean, the question
Well, you
is,
get them in a
what do
garage,
you
you
do?
can't,
Yeah.
unless you're very skinny, you can, yeah.
So we've used this road system in other places. It's
Yeah.
worked well. We know it's worked well in older communities. We do agree that guest parking is an issue, which is why we're adding those guest parking spaces throughout the development. We think that is important. And we do understand the concern about having these cars not have a deep enough driveway, so in that front entry garage, we're pulling it deeper to achieve that.
And to address your question on narrow streets, Newtown has a lot of very narrow streets that are used to slow the traffic, and just as stated before, those traffic speeds are much less than typical subdivisions with the streets that they have. That is our goal. We're gonna be posting these streets at 20 miles per hour. We're gonna have tighter roads, we're gonna have slopes that go up to 15%, and all these things together are gonna work to slow the traffic down.
We just
That's gonna be
commented that Newtown has sidewalks
They
with
do.
narrow streets.
They do.
So
They do.
And it's also like a grid, more like a grid, and this is gonna be a thoroughfare,
Correct.
so it just seems to be different there. And people, I don't know, people are in a hurry generally. You want them to go slow for safety purposes, but, if they're driving out through this subdivision to get to the road, to get to work in the morning, it seems to me like you're giving up a lot for the ecological benefit of saving all the trees, but it's gonna create a lot of problems for people. I just think it's gonna be difficult for people to get in and out and move around in the subdivisions.
Right, we want it to be uncomfortable for them to drive. We do, because if you make it comfortable and they're on a 15% slope, they're gonna hit somebody. If we have houses closer to the road, and you have trees closer to the road, that is something that traffic studies repeatedly show. People slow down. The City of New York, the Street Commissioner of the City of New York, has a really good book about it. I read a lot of traffic books. I don't know why, I'm interested in the subject. She redesigned all of the streets in New York to slow down traffic, change the way traffic flowed, and make it flow better. She didn't make them wider, she made them narrower. And so I understand the thinking, but with the topography in this development, we don't want to create streets that are going to be something that people are going to drive quickly on. We don't think that's safe. So that we believe that actually what we're doing is safer for the public. That's what our design parameters show us. And that's why we're doing it.
But at the
Any
same
thought-
time, we keep encouraging our residents to get out and walk more and bike and do all those things. And everything that we're saying about this development is drive to go see your neighbor, because it's not gonna be, I don't know that I'd want to be walking on these streets that are that
Yeah, and
narrow
I've thought about that.
and the curves.
Yeah, I've thought about that, and if that's something, that's something we can look at further. I mean, I obviously looked at the guest parking in more detail, and, I heard that concern. I can't tell you, obviously, we didn't put it into this plan, but looking at ways to try and create more pedestrian connectivity, I think is a good suggestion. So at this point, we're still kind of at a concept stage, as, Robert noted, but that's something that, if that's the commission's desire or the
I'd like to
council's
see
desire, then we can
some
work through that.
more walking trails within the development.
I understand.
I just think that makes a lot of sense, and in our neighborhood, there's a lot of people out walking all the time, and
Right.
unfortunately not where I particularly live, the sidewalks were an optional thing, so we don't have sidewalks that are connected to anything, and so everybody walks down the middle of the road, and thank goodness they're 26-foot wide streets, or we'd be road kill.
I mean, I think it's, obviously, we're thinking about that. Let us go back and look at it. I understand the concern.
All right.
And obviously, as we've been working through and hearing different things, we've been trying to adapt and change things. That's something that, I get it. So let us go back and look at it and figure out some ways we may be able to help achieve that.
Doug and Brad, maybe something to consider, since it's a more narrow road, is putting rumble strips either on the perimeter and one in the center. I don't know how many people drive roads out here, but there's always somebody that has a fear of getting over to the edge, and you're driving down the road and a car's, a head-on with wide roads. And I know some of the roads that Mr. Ellman was instrumental putting on D and double D and the rumble strips that tries to keep people mostly in the lane. And it really doesn't matter what speed you are, there's people that have a fear, especially with the topography there,
Right.
that they're gonna go rolling off a hillside someplace. So I think maybe put that on your suggestion box of, which I think is an inexpensive way of doing it, but put rumble strips on the outsides and something down the center so that somebody would know exactly where the center of the road is.
Sure. Absolutely, we'll look at that.
Interesting topography, Innsbruck, if you go through there, you see how they handle it. Big painted yellow speed bump, they've got it figured out. You're coming around a corner, and you're going to be picking up speed going down the hill, and they strategically place them to slow down the traffic, along with a lot of encouraging signs like, you're here to relax, settle down. But the speed bumps really do it. Those are serious speed bumps out there.
Yeah, and that's something that, we'll have to talk to the fire department about that and make sure that, that kind of traffic calming provision, if they'll allow us to have it, and obviously, certainly, very much worth looking at. And so, that's a great suggestion. Thank you.
Additionally, I want to say that as we noted, this development's going to be happening over a long time period. We're only expecting 20 or 30 homes per year. So you can see this is not going to be rapid development. It's going to be a fairly slow development. It's going to happen in 10 to 20 years. That's real important to understand how this is going to develop, and then also how the traffic's going to come from that. And I'm going to speak a little bit about the traffic. Also, we've talked very much about the Katy Trail. This property doesn't touch the Katy Trail directly, so right now, as you mentioned, we're not showing any connections to that.
If you could bring up the slides I had up back there, please, again. Thank you.
Thank you. You want me to advance the slides to a certain point, or not?
We can go, yes, we can go to the traffic.
Okay, I'm going to walk you through just some slides to give you some images of what we're thinking about already in terms of just street finishes, just so you have an
I
idea of
appreciate what
that.
you guys are doing. You got a lot of slides.
We do.
Yeah, so try to get through them, please.
So this would be an image of the streets. It's kind of bollard that we'd be looking at. You can see the houses closer to the street and the trees closer to the street, and we talked about why that is. The guardrails that we're going to put in will not be metal or highway department type guardrails. They'll be wood. They specifically make a product like that for use in traffic, and so that'll be the type of guardrail we put in, as it's a very natural look, and that's what we want to achieve in this development. The retaining walls will all be this kind of stone, a natural stone. We're not going to have any concrete retaining walls or some kind of Roman stone or anything like that. So again, trying to create a very natural look for this development. Infrastructure details, to the extent that we're talking about bridges, this is the kind of bridge we're looking at. It's something that's going to span a water area, a creek area. So we'll be looking at some different kinds of designs, very much not traditional. Your light fixtures, they're going to be traffic street lights. Again, be something that's very kind of rural in character, resort in character. And again, finally, we're going to put the houses near to the road. So I'll let Doug kind of walk us through some of the other technical information.
This particular slide shows locations where we're asking for K values less than 25. I won't spend much time on it, but you can see where we're requesting that. This is a slide that shows where we'll have centerline radiuses less than 150 feet. And then this slide shows where we're going to have roadway slopes that are greater than 8% on the road. This is our typical cul-de-sac that I discussed, and what we're proposing to be in there. You have this in your packets. This is the roadway section.
Doug, just real quick, is that tight radius on a cul-de-sac?
Right.
Are fire trucks able to navigate that?
They are, and we'll have to work with the fire department also on that. But what we're proposing is a 40, 45 instead of a typical 55.
I'm just having flashbacks to Newtown and some of the concerns that we had from from the fire department as well as the trash haulers.
Right, and that's something that we absolutely, again, that's that's further down the process. We've got to work through that with the
All right.
Colorado Fire Protection District. As for trash hauling, what we would expect is to do something like Wincastle did. The homeowners association will contract with a trash hauler, so that we've just got one trash hauler coming in and out, as opposed to multiples.
This slide shows typical section for what we're proposing on the roads. And then,
There's a question raised about golf cart crossings. That was something one of the commissioners had asked me about, so we looked at it. How many are proposed here? There are 7 places where golf cart paths cross the road in this development. At Whitmore, there are 18. There's one location where a proposed road's going to run between a tee box and a fairway. We've seen that condition other places. Westboro Country Club, it happens that way. It happens in one place in Whitmore. Just with respect to the golf cart crossings in the streets, Whitmore's never had an accident in 30-year history of some golf cart getting hit by a car. But the question was raised, so I wanted to make sure that we addressed it, and they knew that we had thought about it, and it's a lesser impact. Yes, parking?
this slide shows the areas in red. I know it's very small, but this is a slide that shows the areas that we've designated for 176 guest parking areas. We've tried to distribute that areas throughout there, throughout the whole loop road. And got it. This is detail. It'll be a flare with parallel parking. On the cul-de-sacs, we'll have some areas with head-in parking. And then now I want to talk just briefly about traffic impact. We have looked at the traffic that we're creating for this development, and as I said, it's a long time frame development. What we're going to be doing, 315 homes with another 120 multi-family homes at some phase. That's going to generate roughly 3,737 trips daily. And when we look at that, our largest peak hour trip is in the AM out of the subdivision, which is 393 cars that we have at that time. And switch button, we got it right there. Based on that, you can see the distribution that we have on the peak hour distribution for the adjacent roadways. At Highway 94 South, we're going to have on peak hour, we're going to have like 9 cars. On Highway 94 North, we're going to have 37. The reason for this is because a large percentage of the cars are going to go to Missouri Research Park Circle, which then goes right over to the Highway 64. Approximately 67% of the vehicles that now enter that area go to St. Louis County. When they enter from K and 94, those cars, 67% of those head towards St. Louis County. We believe this subdivision will do at least that much, if not more. So the cars that come out of this subdivision will get on Missouri Research Park Circle or Missouri Circle Drive.
Just a
and head
quick thing, is this an actual traffic study over a certain period of time, or is this something that you've anticipated from some other sources?
It's not a study that's based on traffic out at the site. These are calculations that are derived from a number of homes from a projected development. That's where these calculations are. Because we don't have anything that we can go out there and count other than the existing traffic that's in the research park.
Can we get a traffic study over a month period of time so we can actually see what the real numbers are?
Yeah,
Right.
we've already engaged a traffic engineer to go and do some more detailed analysis because we've seen some questions about it. The way the 60-40 split was derived is that what Doug did was he looked at the traffic that was coming off of the various interchanges on Highway 4064. We can see how much traffic is coming in each interchange. And so we can project how much traffic's going to go east, how much traffic's going to go west. That is a methodology, and those are known numbers that a traffic engineer would use.
Was
What
I
we-
meant
what we-
to talk with you about this, because 94, that's where I'd like to see some real numbers, and also a sampling over maybe a 30-day period. 94 is a nightmare with Francis Howell School. That's log jammed all the way over to the QT station on the other side, depending on whether it's in the morning or in the afternoon. Then you have people coming home from work, even with that new intersection there. So I'd like to see some real numbers, because I think it's something to look at, and how that, I think that whole interchange is gonna have to be by MoDOT or somebody take a look at, and to ease the traffic congestion.
I think one of the things that's important to note with that traffic and with the research park is that what this development is doing is really what you want a development to do. The commercial traffic is coming in the morning into the research park. That's when our traffic is leaving. So we're not adding to the traffic that's already coming into the research park. And when the research park traffic is leaving is when the residential traffic is coming in. So we're not adding to that traffic flow. That doesn't change your question about 94 and the outer road. We understand.
I'd just
that
like
they
to see
want us
some
look
hard
closer
numbers
at
of
it.
a study.
Understand. And so that is something that
Mr.
we're
Ellis has a
looking
question for
closer
you
at.
guys, too.
In your traffic study, you didn't look at the impact on Wolfram Road?
No. No.
Because
We looked at, this traffic is calculated from our development. We did not go out and look at the developments and look at the intersections around there. We're stating this is what's coming from the calculated traffic that'll be created because of this development, based on our density that we're
And
proposing.
that's just based on ITE trip generation numbers.
Correct.
And they tell us what we're supposed to
I
use as a
live in
factor.
this development, fastest way to the closest grocery store is Dearborn's and the Rivers, and I'm gonna take Wolfram Road that puts me out
Yeah, you come out that back way.
on 94. And
Chesterfield
the first
Valley
one-
is pretty
pardon?
close.
Yeah, Chesterfield Valley actually is closer, and if you're going to grocery shop, but not to argue with you, I
We
would
want
tell
to keep
you.
the tax dollars in St. Charles County.
I guess a bad argument. One of the things I did do is I met with the city of Weldon Spring before this meeting. I went out to the Board of Aldermen meeting, and we talked about traffic. And we talked about, you know, whether Wolfram Road would be used, or whether it would, somebody would use Sullenreek Road. to get to- Side and Top to get to 94. For whatever it's worth, their belief.
I live in Whitmore. I know how much Wolfram Road, you got about 1.6 miles of narrow two-lane.
Yep.
Before it's improved. And the closest, fastest way to get to Dearborn is going up Big Trail till you get to the Whitmore entrance. That's where the traffic's gonna go. This grocery store in Chesterfield Valley, there's a ways to a grocery store.
Well, let's take a closer look at that and try and come back with some better answers for you. Did talk, as I said, I met with the Board of Aldermen to get their opinions about it. They were more interested in the impact on Seed and Top and the intersection at 94, which isn't to say it's not a valid concern. So we'll certainly look at it more closely.
Any other questions on that? Anything else that you'd like me to discuss?
Keep it moving.
This is overall traffic volumes. Again, this is in your packet, so you can take a look at it to see. That last slide was peak hour. This is total traffic volumes. And again, we're talking about 3,737 trips a day. The business park or the research park is roughly about 4,000 or more trips per day. So this is less trips than actually Missouri Research Park.
Excuse me, does that include commercial vehicles coming in to the development also?
Yes.
Like
it
your
does.
FedEx trucks or whatever?
Yes. And then this is we had a question about traffic accidents, and this is the report from the Missouri Highway Patrol. This is a search of their database. That's a one-year history of what's happened there. And searching everything that is Research Park, Interstate 64, and those areas, there was 9 accidents that came up when you did the search, and 8 of those were on the interstate. Only one of those accidents was on, the top one was on Research Park Drive at Highway 94. So that, only one of those 9 accidents was actually on Research Park Drive. No accidents were reported on Research Park Circle.
What was the time frame on this study?
1 year.
1 year.
The last, everything's happening last year.
Okay.
And how many vehicles are on that route right now?
At the Boone Bridge, there's roughly 80.
I'm sorry, onto the research, just to get a
Oh, on
kind of a
the-
sense of proportionality.
Yeah, right now, it's probably in the 4,000 range on that. And out on the interstate's 87,000 out on the Boone Bridge, roughly.
What's next?
All right, so we also looked at wetlands on the site and stream impact. As we retained SCI Engineering to go out and do a wetlands assessment. Again, comments about environmental impact have been raised as development, so we asked SCI to go out and tell us what kind of stream impact we were going to have. These are the areas that they analyzed. This is all the developable area that we are going to be developing as this project. And they went over the entire site, walked the site, took pictures of all the tributaries, and prepared a report based upon that. Their initial report showed that we were going to have about 1,000 lineal feet of impact on tributaries. Under the federal government's 404 program, if you have more than 300 lineal feet of impact, you have to get what's called an individual permit from the Corps of Engineers and Fish and Wildlife. That process takes about 6 months to a year. So we went back and we asked them to, we went back to Pickett and said, please revise the plan, reduce the impacts. They got rid of some more lots. We reduced the impact to 525 lineal feet. We said, that's not good enough. Get us down to below 300 feet. And so that's what we did. So the current impact on water bodies in this development is, I believe, it's 245 lineal feet, which is incredibly low. So as a result, we do not need to get an individual permit. We simply get a nationwide permit for a road crossing in the 1 or 2 places where that occurs. In Phase A, which is the first phase, there's no impact at all. So we're getting a no permit issuance from the Corps of Engineers. There would have been an impact. There's a tributary A there. We pulled all the lots back, so we made sure that we didn't impact it. So that is the design principle of this development. When there's environmental impact, we pull it back. We don't try and cram more lots in. So these are the tributaries that we're making sure we don't touch and we don't disturb as part of this development. And this is just a copy of SCI's letter to the Corps. And in that letter, it notes that we have a no impact with respect to our first phase and simply a couple of nationwides in phases C and D. So with respect to our project, when I talked about the revised layout and grading, just going to take you through quickly some examples of what we did. On the left-hand side is the original layout. You've never seen this because this was the layout that had too much impact on the water bodies and the streams. So on the right side is how we revised it to eliminate impact and reduce it. Same in this case. What we had was a road that was crossing 2 places on the tributary. So we changed the location of the road, took out some lots, and we're able not to impact that tributary at all. With this part of the development, we had a road that was, it was a cul-de-sac that was on the north. You can see on the right-hand side where the letter D is, we took that cul-de-sac out. We changed the entire orientation of the lots. And we did that, we changed the lots from being kind of less deep as they are on the left-hand side and deeper on the right-hand side and changed the entire road orientation. And we did that again to avoid stream impact because that is the design principle of this development. Again, with this part of the development, we had 2 roads in the left-hand side that were coming up into the development that were terminating in a turnaround area or a cul-de-sac. We eliminated those and we changed that so it's just 1 road terminating a cul-de-sac. And by doing that, we were able to eliminate impacts. Same thing here with this part of the development. This is on the eastern side of the development. We got rid of that circular area, eliminated it because it's causing too much impact, got rid of the lots that were associated with it, changed it to this design on the right-hand side of the screen. So we're doing all of that, and I'm showing you that by way of illustration because that's how we're designing this site, is we're taking things out when we see environmental impact. We're not trying to create impact. So with respect to housing, just to take you through that, there were some questions asked about our design requirements and what we would be doing in this project. First of all, we'll have a town architect, Tim Bussey. He's here in the audience. Tim is a licensed architect. He's been practicing for over 30 years. And he will be the town architect for this site. And no home may be built, no site plan may be approved or begin construction on unless Tim approves it. So we're going to get development control through the standards that are going to be overseen by the town architect. Some of the standards that are going to be required, we will require architectural style roof shingles. We will only allow wood windows, either Anderson or Colby wood windows. All of the garage doors will be a carriage style garage door. It doesn't matter whether it's side entry, rear entry, or front entry. They'll all be carriage style garage door. All of the colors in the development are going to be earth tones. We're not going to have anything that's loud or you're going to presumably see from a long distance. It's all going to be earth tones required in the development. With respect to the siding, we will not allow vinyl siding. We'll only have hardy fiber cement siding or an LP Smart Side siding. There will be trim around all of the exterior windows and doors, and that's not simply on the front elevation, which some builders do. That'll be required all the way around 360 with respect to the entire home. With respect to any kind of hardscape or on the home and the exterior, we're going to require culture stone or brick exteriors. We're going to encourage the use of natural stone. We think that's, a better fit for this development. So that's going to be the design element that we're going to try and steer builders to. With respect to fireplace chimneys, those will be either stone, culture stone, or brick. The driveways, we will not have any kind of concrete driveway that isn't something that's finished. So it's either going to be an exposed aggregate or stamped concrete or concrete pavers or else asphalt. So you won't have any this brush finish kind of white concrete driveways in this development. Those driveways are more expensive. We think it's appropriate. Again, no vinyl siding. There will be no fencing along the golf course. And there will be restrictions with respect to cutting down trees on those lots, particularly in the rear portion of those lots, because we want to preserve that wooded area, as we mentioned earlier. We are going to encourage rain gardens on lots to further address stormwater. If there is a front porch, it's going to have to be a usable front porch. So it's going to have to be at least 7 feet of minimum depth. And with respect to landscaping, we will be reviewing the landscaping, and we will only allow native plants. That are native Missouri plants. We're not going to have any kind of species that's being planted on a landscaping plan that is either invasive or something that is outside of Missouri. That, again, is fairly unusual. I think one of the letters that we saw that somebody was saying, well, you should require native planting. We, in fact, are going to do that. So, again, that's part of this theme of this development, to make it something that's unique and that does have a Missouri flavor to the development. Again, that's Tim Bussey. He will be the town architect. And these are just some images of some of the houses that we would anticipate that you could see in this development. The houses will range in price point from $500,000 to over $1 million with respect to pricing in the single-family homes. So again, just some images of the types of homes that we would expect to be built here and be appropriate for the site. So I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Yeah, go ahead.
The no fencing on the golf course, will the deeds to the lots have a covenant that will allow golfers to enter backyards to retrieve a golf ball?
We'll have the same covenant or similar covenant that they have at Whitmore. Yeah, which I drafted a long time ago, so I call it the covenant of death. So that if you hit a golf ball, it's the golfer's issue. So the homeowners are
No,
gonna
I'm not talking
know.
about damage, I'm just talking go retrieve.
Yeah,
there's not a
the same kind of retrieval, but one of the things that's nice about this golf course is Fazio's design tends to keep things more centered with it, but that doesn't mean people don't hit errantly. I do get that, so, yeah.
Yeah, we talked about the liability, and I did some more research around with golf courses. And anybody that has a house 150 feet off of any tee, it's not if, it's when they're gonna get hit. So there is, but this whole environment, and getting back to the liability, I know it's gonna be back on the homeowners, but right now, you can play golf out there, and the only thing you can hit is another golfer. So what we're gonna have now is an element of three different things. You've got homes where a golf ball could potentially hit. You've got roads crossing golf carts, and then or part of being part or I guess involved in the inner structure of the golf course, and also the roads, which have cars. So on the pedestrian part of it, you've got people walking, jogging, riding, and they are going to be having access on for the roads with a golf court. How would that liability work? I'm very curious. I can understand.
Probably work the same way it's worked in Whitmore for the last 30 years,
If somebody's
where we
walking with a
haven't had
child
any,
and-
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt,
Yeah,
go ahead.
As an example, a woman's walking a child and somebody's teeing up and looking up and boom, it hits in the head and kills a child, God forbid. I mean, how do you regulate, from a legal standpoint, I'm very curious, how do you tell people, well, you can't walk there because if you get hurt, it's going to be your fault? I can understand a house because it's going to be in the deed of the property, but when you have people that are living there and using that environment.
You want a legal opinion from him on
Sorry?
this? You want a legal opinion from him on this?
Yes, absolutely. He's
Okay.
a lawyer.
Well, I know that.
I'm under oath, too.
You are.
You know, what I would refer you to is really experience. Whitmore has been in existence since the late 80s. It has twice as many road crossings with respect to golf cart paths. It has houses which are significantly closer to the, as you well know,
I've been a member for 20 years.
right, to the golf course than anything that's contemplated in this development. And in point of fact, we don't have houses being pummeled with golf balls in Whitmore. I will tell you, since I was involved in that development from the very beginning, there was, at the start, there was one home in one section that had a problem, as I remember. I think it was on a whole 10, but they've changed the numbering now. And there was an issue, and so what we did was we put a screen in there. We also put trees along the side of that fairway, but the screen worked very well because if you hit the ball the way I hit the golf ball, it immediately hits the fence and drops. So the slice was completely eliminated. And so that just has not been an issue in Whitmore. I was at another golf course community in California for a wedding
Mr.
about
Goff, I mean, I appreciate all that
couple months
stuff.
ago.
I mean, he wants to know what the liability is, and if you can answer that, I think we can get moving on a little bit quicker, too.
The liabilities, it would be the liability of the facts and circumstances of the case. I can't give you an abstract opinion. What I can tell you is the golf course communities in this kind of interaction is not unique or new or different. This isn't the first one. In fact, this probably has less interaction of the golf course with homes and impact than you'd see in a typical golf course community. The Art Litton course at Whitmore was designed to sell homes. That's what Art Litton did. He was pulled in from Florida to create a development along a golf course to maximize those homes looking at the golf course. And so you had a lot more risk with it. But the fact is, we haven't seen that problem. Haven't seen it at the Links at Dardenne, haven't seen it at Golf Club at Winsville. So I
Mr.
can only give you
Klinghammer?
experience.
You have a question?
Yeah, I guess this is really directed more at Mr. Bussey. The example of the houses that could be built here, I know these aren't, designs, and we can't go out and buy, this house yet. But I'm curious how these houses would be representative, how they would fit on the 60-foot lots. you went through and spent a lot of time talking about how you had to redesign it so that you didn't have the stream impact. And for the most part, you narrowed the lots and made it much deeper. And I understand that, that's great planning and everything. But some of them have gotten really skinny, and trying to fit a house and a garage or driveway to a garage on a 60-foot lot, I'm curious, these houses I don't think would fit.
Well, no, some of those houses wouldn't, you're absolutely right, but some of them would. And,
It looks like most of them wouldn't unless you had alley in the back. I mean, we have lots of houses right around here that are on 45 and 50-foot lots, but they also have an alley in the back to get to the garage.
Right.
So, I mean, these houses don't show garages, so where are people gonna park, and how are you gonna get a $500,000 house on a 60-foot wide lot?
well, we have some homes that are $400,000, $500,000 on lots that are smaller than 60 feet in Newtown.
Usually
you know,
with alleys.
the price.
Alleys to get to the garages, so.
Yeah, but I understand, but what I'm saying is the size of the home doesn't necessarily equate to the
Sure.
value. So just to address that. And, you know, looking at the overall distribution of lots in the development, the 60-foot lot is not a dominant lot. There are 60-foot lots. You're going to have a smaller home on those. That's correct. And, you know, I can't tell you, looking at those homes, what the size of that home is. I can tell you a lot of those are big homes, clearly. But we see those probably certainly on the bigger lots. And if you'd like us to bring in some elevations of something that we
Well, I
might
mean, if
anticipate
you're
there,
gonna
I'm
show us,
happy to do it.
if you're gonna show pictures of the houses that are gonna be built there, I think that it should be reflective of what could be built there. And do you know how many 60-foot lots you have in your development?
I do know that. Don't have that in front of me. Yeah, they don't have that.
On a 60-foot lot, you talked about the overlay, how much of a side yard setback would there be to the structure of the house?
5 foot, 6 foot?
6 or 7.
I think it's a 6-foot side yard setback is what we're calling for.
Okay.
You've got, in terms of the lots, the way, on the 315, we've got 70 lots that are 60 foot. We have, at this design, we have 179 that are 70-foot lots. We have 12 lots that are 80-foot wide, and we have 54 lots that are 100-foot wide under this design.
Okay.
And so, and in terms of acreage, the size of the lots, the average size of the lot is half an acre.
Yeah.
So, but you're correct, some of that is achieved by having it deeper and having it less wide. One of the things that we found with builders is they've tended to want a narrower lot. But, you know, we believe that this offers another option for people. It is not the dominant lot in the development. There are a number of them. I absolutely agree with you. Those lots tend to be concentrated more up on the eastern side, over near, off the clubhouse on that drive, and in one particular phase over on the western side.
Okay, I'm just trying to get a visual
Understand.
image of what the development's gonna look like. So
Right.
houses up close to the street, a significant portion of them on narrow 60 and 70-foot lots with perhaps 12 feet between the houses. Okay.
So,
Kind of piggybacking on that too, if I could for a second. Now, these are, I've realized representations, but they're all
Right,
shown
these are
on
not the
generally
plans.
level lots. Is this being designed so that, I know that there's, you know, slopes, but are the lots being designed to be relatively flat entrance to the streets, generally speaking? I mean, again, trying to get representative.
we have not gotten to a grading plan. That's much too far down the road with respect to how each lot will be designed.
Okay.
I really would not be able to answer that
Okay.
question.
Thank you.
You know, I can tell you that with respect to the slopes of the lots, we've looked at other developments in Georgia that have a similar type of topography and how they handle the slopes in those lots. We are looking at that in terms of grades, but again, the intent isn't to grade out a big flat pad. So more likely than not, what's going to happen is the lot is going to slope away, and you're going to have a tall wall on the back or a double wall on the back with respect to that. Yeah, with respect, that's what we think is going to happen, because we don't want to grade into that land. But I can't tell you I've done an exact grading plan for that.
I've got two big concerns, and not to get all into the details of this. Number one, as we've had diminishing golf courses in St. Charles County, we've lost 5 of them. My concern right now, this is a public course. If this development was built someplace else and it didn't involve meshing with the golf course, I think this thing would fly through, get voted on and get passed. But since it's being involved and also inclusive of a golf course, you mentioned that it was a 100-year lease with 75 or 80 years left. I would like, and you mentioned that it would remain a public course. Would that be put in writing, that this would be the lease part of the course, that this would be available to St. Charles County residents? As right now, I think of it as an adjunct to our county park system. And for all tax-paying people in St. Charles have use of that golf course. I could see if homes go in there and this thing flips and goes private, all the people out here, including myself and everybody else in St. Charles, how are we going to benefit for that? I mean, the builder's obviously going to benefit because he's going to sell homes and make a profit. But I'm looking at it for the overall view of all of St. Charles County and St. Charles City. How do they benefit if this does not stay as a public course? And you mentioned it would stay as a public course. Would you be willing to put that in writing?
Well, it's in writing now. The lease provides that it is a public course, and that is the agreement that we have, and that land lease remains in place, and that's something that is a requirement.
But we are changing the, if we go to this 405.105 RB3, the permissive uses, for example, number 8, which we discussed before, and that's the other issue I have, multifamily, multiple household dwellings, including apartments, cluster homes, condominiums, townhouses, and villas. The only word that I don't like in there is apartments. All the other multi-house dwellings is the same as a homeowner. They have some vested interest in this development. An apartment unit does not. I mean, they can do a 30-day lease and, hey, we're out of here. But I would like to see some assurance that for the multi-household dwellings and flexibility in design and blah, 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 but not to include apartments.
You know, a couple different thoughts about that. The golf course is remaining. It's a $10 million investment. The best assurance of a quality multifamily development is that asset. Whoever owns that asset is not going to allow the housing, be it apartments or what have you, be something that negatively affects that substantial investment. Regardless of what we regulate, plan, or whatever, that, I believe, is the best assurance that whatever happens with respect to apartments is they be high quality in terms of their appearance and kept up. There also will be covenants with respect to those, and those covenants will be enforceable by the homeowners association. They will not get a free skate as far as that goes. So if the appearance or there are other problems with the apartments over time, that's something that will be enforced. If this commission, I also think that apartments offer another housing option. One of the things that we've seen recently is a housing trend, and I just was in Webster Groves getting an apartment project approved. Webster Groves is not exactly what you'd think of as an apartment community. They approved it because what studies show is that people, older generation, 60 and up, are wanting apartments as a housing option, as opposed to owning their home. And that's happening more and more. So that could also be an option. Having said all of that, if apartments are something that causes this commission a lot of problems, and they'd want to require those to be condominiums, so be it. We're not here to have a super dense housing development.
I would feel much
So
more
we're here to have a
comfortable with that.
quality housing development. If that's something the commission feels strongly about, we understand, we would respect it. We happen to think that there are adequate safeguards with
But a lot
respect to
of-
that,
A lot
but
of
we
apartments going
understand.
up Highway 40, up towards Winghaven, a lot of building with apartments. I think there's a lot of other places to put apartments, not integrated with this development here, planned unit development with home ownership. I think anybody that's in there, whether it's a multifamily or a single family, should have some vested interest in the community, and they'll probably be a better steward of taking care of their property and the surrounding area.
Right, and again, I don't share that opinion, but I respect it. So if that's the will of this commission, then that's fine. We're not trying to create, that's the tail, that is not the dog in this community. So I don't want to have that be an issue that causes a problem with this commission favorably considering this development. We think it's a nice option, but the commission doesn't share that view. We respect that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you, gentlemen.
If I may, I wanted to, the check marks, Tim.
You're
homes
killing me,
with,
you know
60
that,
foot
don't you?
lot. Okay. I want to answer your question, Councilman Klinghammer, if I may. I want to show the pictures that fit on a 60-foot lot. Wasn't in my purview, I asked Tim to do that. Do you mind if I do that on the screen? And I don't know how to make this come on as well.
It'll come on automatically.
Okay, thank you. And I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, to lengthen
That's okay.
this. Thank you. So if you look at the homes that have check marks on them, it's the top right, the bottom right, and the lower left corner. Those are all homes that would fit on a 60-foot lot.
Mr. Goss, just in all respect, when I see your road plan here, your roads are gonna be built right on the top of the ridges,
Yes.
so the water can run off. You stated that earlier. So if you say a 60-foot lot, and you got, the street is taking up, even though we talked about the oven, and a setback, it seems like you don't really have 60 foot there, because it's gonna be sloping in the back.
No, you misunderstood. The width of the lot is 60 feet. That is the width of the lot. The street right-of-way is different. You have, your street right-of-way is what's in front. The width of the lot would be 60 feet or 70 feet or 100 feet. And that width doesn't change. That has nothing to do with the stormwater.
I do understand that, but which way is the slope going to go if you start your road on the very top of the bluff or on the
It'll go
hill?
toward the back of the lot. What you do is
It's gonna fall off because the water's gonna run off like that.
in some cases, it's going to depend on the particular lot and the topography. In some cases, you may direct it from the front of the house toward a ditch and bring it along the road and then take it back. That's going to depend on the individual grade of the individual lots. And so in some cases, you're absolutely right. It's going to go toward the back. But you may, the way your house sits in the lot, you may split it. You may bring it toward the front for the front half and the water in the back will go towards the back. That's just going to depend upon your lot and how you do that. So I can see it and have seen it in a number of different ways.
But they're all gonna be built off of a road.
Correct.
That's my point. And the road's gonna be higher than anything around it.
That's true.
Not necessarily. I mean, there'll be a pad out there. The road is put on the ridge, but we are gonna grade off that area, the flat part of that for the road. We do expect the houses to be very close to road grade or possibly lower than that, but they're not gonna be far different from the road. The intention is to keep them, because they are close to the road and the setbacks there, they're not gonna be well down below the road. And there's also not gonna be a lot of area for water drainage to accumulate in that area. It's a small area, so we'll run that between those homes on those lot lines.
You'll also have swales on each side of the road, which is designed to take that water away. So that's something that, obviously that's an important detail. And so we'll be analyzing the stormwater flows and working with county staff. And county staff's going to have to approve all of that and sign off on it and make sure that the way we're handling stormwater is proper and meets the county's requirements. So that, again, is going to be an individual section-by-section analysis as we go through all of that detail, kind of like improvement plans we get further down the road. So with respect to the homes, those 3 homes would fit on a 60-foot lot. On this picture, the lower right and the middle home would fit on a 60-foot lot. On this picture, all of the homes on the right-hand side fit on a 60-foot lot, as would the home on the top of that picture would fit on a 60-foot lot. And both,
We'll get into that later.
all right,
'cause those-
well, and both of these
Those
homes
houses
would.
will fit if you had I don't see where the driveway will be. but
Right, and,
that-
and,
we'll
right,
lay it
and I'm
out
not an
later.
architect, so that's why I asked Tim to do that and not me. So the last thing that I would mention, and I didn't mention this in my earlier remarks, I know that Zoltec is here, representatives from Zoltec. We've just briefly talked to one another before the meeting. I hadn't had the opportunity to meet their counsel. And we understand they have concerns with respect to lots that would be backing up to the Zoltec facility. We're mindful of that. So a couple of things that we're going to do with respect to those lots, and also with any lots that back up to the Duckett Creek plant, is we will have disclosures in our contract disclosing the fact that Zoltec is there and that Zoltec runs 24 hours a day. They have machinery, they have lights. And I've already talked to counsel for Zoltec, and I've said, we will run that disclosure by you, and we'll get in a form that you're comfortable with. So that, if you don't think we're representing how terrible this is, tell us how much more terrible to make it. Because we want a buyer who's buying there to buy with eyes open. When we have sold homes in Newtown, we have a couple of paragraphs in those contracts that talk about noise, lights, and tell people, if you don't like that stuff, you don't like people living close to you, do not buy here. And again, an attempt to explain so that they're not upset. We don't want to upset people buying here. So that's something we will do with Zoltec. We'll also talk to the Duckett Creek folks about that. We're also, while the area behind Zoltec is an area we're not disturbing in terms of tree removal, we're still going to sit down and talk with them about buffer and tree buffer and that kind of thing as well, so that, if, we think if there's a feeling we need to do more and address that, we will do that. So that's a dialogue that we're going to have with them. I don't know if he's going to speak tonight or not, but I did want to make sure that I mentioned that as well.
And then one last question.
One last question. 4 or 5 years ago, there was an issue at Whitmore with City of Welland Spring. There were some areas that supposedly had been platted as park ground or parkland, and then it was proposed to develop those 4 or 5 lots. Are you familiar with that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I am.
Is there any area here that would fall into that situation?
No, and those lots actually were part of, those lots were areas that weren't usable, but I don't want to go back and rehash past history. That is not the case here. And in fact, the plan that we have is a plan that is approved by this board. And once that plan is set, for us to deviate from that plan, we have to come back here. And in fact, as Robert noted, we'll be back here if we're approved several times as we work through the plan. But adding lots, changing that plan in that manner, no. That's not allowed, and also it wouldn't be allowed by the university. The university has signed off on this plan, and if anything, it will be less dense, not more dense. We won't be adding lots in that manner.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and open it up to the public. Anybody in the room that wants to speak on this for our behalf, and there's several of you, I'm asking you to come up. You might want to just get in line, have you sworn in, and might want to start it over here. Don't forget to fill out a speaker's card. Go ahead, you just hold on. Don't forget to fill out a speaker's card and try to keep your comments at 3 minutes. And if it's exactly the same thing as the person before you, doesn't really help just to come up and say exactly the same problems. We kind of know some of the issues, but anyway, we're going to give you a chance to talk, and raise your right hand, sir. You swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
And state your name and address for the record.
Steve Jeffrey, 400 Chesterfield Center, Suite 400, Chesterfield, Missouri, 63017.
Go ahead, Steve.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight to speak in opposition to a portion of the zoning request and the concept plan. As I indicated, I am an attorney in Chesterfield, and I represent Zoltec Corporation. Zoltec, and during my remarks, I will be referring to a 6-page handout, which Mr. Hazelwood advises has been distributed to everyone. Yes.
Why don't you put that up on the screen for us? I know, might as well put it up and let everyone see it. They'll bring it up. Go ahead, so go ahead with your presentation. Just leave it there, yeah.
As I said, Zoltec Corporation is an international corporation. They're primarily engaged in the manufacture of carbon fiber and related products. They're headquartered in St. Louis, Missouri, and since 1991, they have had a manufacturing facility located in the Missouri Research Park. If you turn to the last page, or the last 2 pages in the handout, what's marked as Zoltec Enclosure 1 is an aerial photograph which shows the location of the Zoltec facility, and here's the location of the Ducky Creek Sewer Plant, and here's the Bluffs Golf Course, just to orient everyone to the physical layout here. As you can tell by looking at the aerial photograph, the area to the west and southwest of Zoltec is heavily wooded, it's heavily vegetated, and it's been that way for decades. If you turn to the last page of the handout, is a topo map. And again, this shows where the Zoltec facility is located, and for anyone who's experienced in looking at topo maps, you can look at the gradient lines drop off significantly to the west and southwest going away from the Zoltec property. So if you look at the topo map and the aerial combined, what this tells you is a heavily vegetated, old growth area that significantly goes downhill. Because of this topography, this downhill area all to the west and southwest of the plant, all of the stormwater that's generated at the Zoltec property, along with all of the other properties in that immediate vicinity, it flows downhill. We believe because of the development plan that we were provided a copy of, that the phase of the development that would be located adjacent to the Zoltec plant, and then I have this delineated in orange on the map, has a strong potential of seriously impacting stormwater flows in the area, particularly if some of these lots go uphill from the cul-de-sac and are located within 100 feet of a manufacturing facility. That raises serious concerns about compatibility between a residential use and an ongoing industrial operation, which Mr. Townsend, who is also here with me, will go into in more detail. But we believe that the stormwater impacts and the fact that all this vegetation and trees will be destroyed or significantly impacted is inconsistent with the applicable St. Charles County zoning ordinance 405.015.b, 2 purposes which include, quote, the preservation of the natural terrain and waterways, and 6, the control of stormwater that could impact downstream flooding. We believe this entire area in orange raises significant concerns whether this project will comply with the applicable zoning code. Because of these changes and the effects of the terrain and the stormwater, we do request that the commission give strong consideration to denying the portion of the concept plan and the rezoning that's outlined in orange. Because as a bottom line, if these folks would like to develop a golf course resort community, keep it where the golf course is. There's no need to have it next to an active industrial plant. And I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Go ahead, Mr. Ellis.
Your letter dated December 19th.
Correct, that's included in the handout.
By your presence, are you waiving your request that this be continued because of your letter stated improper notice?
We would like to preserve that for the record.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. I'm going to have to go to, and we'll start with you guys. Thanks. Come on up. Raise your right hand, please. You swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
And state your name and address for the record.
Paul Townsend, 116 Valley Forge, St. Charles, 63303.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman and members of the commission, thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening in opposition to a portion of the rezoning request. My name is Paul Townsend. I'm the general manager of U.S. operations for Zoltech Corporation. As Mr. Jeffrey stated, Zoltech Corporation operates a manufacturing plant at the Missouri Research Park. We manufacture technical carbon fiber and subcomponents of that carbon fiber. We've been at this facility for over 20 years, and we are a 24/7 operation. In addition, the facility operates in accordance with all environmental regulation and permitting issued by the state of Missouri. Also, there's a significant amount of truck traffic delivering raw materials to the plant and transporting finished goods to the plant, again on a 24/7 basis. The facility also has auxiliary support, manufacturing support equipment outside of the building, which also operates on a 24/7 basis. We believe locating homes next to an operating manufacturing plant like ours is a bad idea and would likely lead to future issues between residents and the companies operating in the Missouri Research Park area. This issue could concern possible complaints of excessive noise, excessive light, excessive truck traffic, excessive stormwater runoff, and possible odors from the plant's operation. We believe such an outcome is not in anyone's best interest. Therefore, we request you deny that portion of the rezoning request that is shown in the orange that was provided by Mr. Jeffrey. And thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Go ahead. Thank you. Come on up.
Thank you.
Raise your right hand. You swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
State your name and address for the record.
Chuck Gross with Duckett Creek at 3550 Highway K, O'Fallon, Missouri.
Go ahead, Ms. Gross.
Thank you. Members of the commission, Duckett Creek, as Brad mentioned, does have the capacity to handle the flow from the proposed development. And that part of it we certainly support. However, there are three broad issues, two of which are real quick I want to mention. The third one takes a little bit longer. The first issue is dealing with our access road. Currently, under an agreement with the University of Missouri, we're required to maintain that access road. But we believe because of the traffic that it now is going to have from the development, as well as what's amounted over the years to pretty heavy public traffic going down to the Katy Trail access, that all of that road should no longer fall under our responsibility to maintain. The other issue with the road has to do with the way, I'll call it the Duckett Access Road, intersects with the Research Park Drive. It's at a really severe angle, which right now doesn't matter much because there's not a whole lot of traffic accessing that intersection. But with the cars coming out of the development, that is going to be a real problem. We've looked at ways to maybe reroute that road to the east a little bit and make a nice 90-degree intersection with the road up there. That may be a problem because of the trails that have been built in that area. I'm not really sure, but I think that needs to be addressed. Because after the stop sign that we encounter with the Missouri Research Park Drive, within, I'll say, less than 100 feet, there's another stop sign. And if you add all of these cars into that road and two stop signs that close to each other, you're going to have them backing up, which, of course, we care about because it's going to back up our service vehicles, including our sludge trucks, on a very steep hill. That's not a good combination, so we have that concern. The second major concern or broad concern has to do with our connection fees, and we just want to be on the record to make sure that the developer knows that we will require that the standard connection fees be paid to us as they get the permits from Duckett Creek. The third issue takes a little bit longer, and that has to do with the proximity of our plant to the proposed development. Now, I'm not sure exactly how close the houses will be to our plant. It looks really close on the plans, but I don't know. But I wanted to just make sure everybody knew that this is a 7 million gallon a day plant. It's the largest plant that we operate. The plant has operated for over 20 years at this location. We have never received a violation notice that we've exceeded our discharge limits, and also we have never received a complaint from anybody using the trail. If you've been down there, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's a beautiful trail that goes along a really nice creek, pretty creek, babbling brook, if you will, outside of our plant. Well, that babbling brook is Duckett Creek, and people enjoy it a lot, and they should. It's very nice. But all those people using that trail over the years have yet to complain about any odors. In other words, that plant operates really, really well. But it is a sewer plant. And I don't care what sewer plant you operate where, you are eventually going to have odors. Now, odors are different than sound and different than light. Odors will find their own way, depending on the wind, the humidity, the temperature, the terrain, whatever. Odors will, you could be 10 feet away from a plant and not smell anything, and be 150 feet away in a different direction and smell odors from the plant. I'm not saying it's going to be severe. It hasn't been severe to date. It's a very good plant. But you can't guarantee with any buffer or distance, you can't guarantee with any of those things that you're not occasionally going to have some odors coming from the plant. And so, in looking at not only the county ordinances that require, for PUDs that require buffers between uses, and the state regulations that require when you're siting a new plant that you have at least 150 feet between the plant and residential uses, we think a buffer is a good idea of 150 feet. But I have to stress again, no buffer zone is going to keep and guarantee that you're not going to have some odors in the area and some people that don't like that. With regard to the light pollution, we don't have many lights on at the plant. I don't really see that as a big issue. But if your house backs up to and overlooks the plant, yeah, there's going to be light down there, and we want to make sure folks understand that. And then the last thing is the noise. This is a big plant. This is a big plant with very big motors, very big blowers, very big generators, and it operates 24/7. And every day there'll be a constant reminder to those who live in close proximity that there's a sewer plant down there. Once a week, we have to exercise our generators. That is going to create a much larger or a much louder noise in the area. So with regard to the issue of notification of prospective home buyers, we implore the county and this commission to, at a minimum, for the purpose of shielding residents from the sight, sound, and to an extent, the smell of the plant's operations, to require a buffer zone of at least 150 feet from the plant facilities to the residences. 2, require a notice in all promotional materials that there is a sewer plant adjacent to the development. And you can refer back to when Page Avenue was being developed and subdivisions were being planned along that route. Those promotional materials said there's going to be Page Avenue here, just buyer beware. And then the third thing is require a recorded notice on the deed that there is a sewer plant in the research park adjacent to a residential development. We've met with Mr. Goss and the folks with Pickett, Ray, and Silver. They're very well aware of the concerns, and I believe they're sincere in trying to address those. This is how we think they can be addressed.
Your access road, is that public or private?
It's private. We just have an easement to use it. We just have an easement to use it.
Okay, so their proposed plan is crossing over?
Yes.
Okay, your portion of the road that's private?
The entire road is private, and we're required to maintain the entire road.
But I'm saying their
Yes.
plan here has their road crossing over your private road.
We're not the owners of the road. We just use it.
The one you use.
They're at
Right.
the access.
Yeah, it's private, but it's not ours. The university's.
Okay, any other questions for Mr. Gross? Thank you.
Thank you.
Raise your right hand. You swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth.
I do.
State your name and address for the record.
Tracy Papillo, 120 South Central Avenue, Clayton, Missouri, 63105, Suite 1500.
Go ahead, Tracy.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. My name is Tracy Papillo. I'm an attorney with Blitz Barget. I represent the Katy Land Trust in Magnificent, Missouri. And as you might suspect, they're objecting to the request for rezoning that's before you this evening. These two nonprofit organizations are dedicated to raising conservation awareness, preserving agricultural resources, and natural scenic beauty along the Katy Trail, as well as throughout Missouri. I sent a letter today that hopefully is included in your packets. If it's not, let me know. I can provide you with a copy. It sets forth, outlines legal objections that we have to the request for rezoning. Before I get into those, I want to start off with an issue that Member Cleary immediately raised, and I would say very perceptively raised, and that is, this isn't just a request for a concept plan. This is a request that this property be rezoned to the highest density residential use permitted under the St. Charles County Code, R3B. Despite all the talk about the concept plan this evening, I think we heard probably close to 2 hours. The idea that this concept plan is going to ensure proper and responsible development, it's a fiction, it's a fallacy. It is not true in light of the fact that the underlying zoning of this property is going to be changed. Mr. Price indicated, I think he described it as a bundle of rights that property has for that underlying zoning classification. It's what's permitted in the R3B district or any other district that property owners can use as a matter of right without coming before you. And let's take a look at what can be done in the R3B district without coming in front of you. And that is, I think when I looked at the zoning code, 20 units per acre in an R3B district, 20 units per acre. Single-family homes, lots are only 4,000 square feet. Lawyers are never good at math, but that equates to about 10 houses per acre. Those are permitted uses in this district. And the planned unit overlay, we all know, and you heard this evening, that's a long process. A lot of things can go wrong during that process. This plan may never come to fruition. And what the St. Charles County Code provides is that if the project's abandoned, the governing body, that's you, the council, they can automatically lift that overlay. And what you're left with is that R3B zoning district for this beautiful piece of property. And with respect to the legal issues that this raises, there was no dispute in the staff report that the R3B zoning district does not comply with the master plan. The property at issue here has been zoned agricultural for almost 6 decades, and the 2025 master plan shows the future land use of that property as parks and open space. Section 405.077 of the St. Charles County Code provides that all zoning amendments shall be in accordance with the master plan for St. Charles County. Here, the land use designation, that R3B, it's not only inconsistent with the land use designation in the master plan, it's at odds with the very intent and the goals set forth in the master plan. The St. Charles County Master Plan recognizes the importance of preserving the county's natural resources and scenic beauty. It promotes the importance of agricultural uses. It recognizes that many of these agricultural areas are in environmentally sensitive areas, and it calls for limited development in these areas. In contrast to the requirements of the master plan, the R3B multifamily residential district, its intended purpose under the code is to allow for medium and high-density residential use. The permitted uses include apartments, cluster homes, condominiums, townhouses, and villas. And again, that's with a density of 20 units per acre. Mr. Griffin brought up, hey, I don't like the idea of apartments. Well, you don't need if you don't want apartments, you don't need R3B zoning. And again, what can happen is that PUD overlay district will be removed, and there's no limitations on apartments in that district. The other thing is, I think from a legal perspective, the requested rezoning constitutes impermissible spot zoning. Spot zoning occurs where there's an arbitrary and unreasonable change in zoning inconsistent with the surrounding uses for the benefit of one property owner. In contrast, a valid zoning amendment is in accordance with the comprehensive plan and done for the public good. Here, there's no evidence that this is being done for the public good. It's not in accordance with the comprehensive plan. It is inconsistent with the master plan. It's inconsistent with the surrounding uses, as you've heard this evening. It's inconsistent with the industrial uses that are currently there. It's inconsistent with the Katy Trail State Park. It's inconsistent with the conservation areas that surround this piece of property. In light of the foregoing, Katy Land Trust and Magnificent Missouri respectfully request that the Planning and Zoning Commission recommend denial of the request for rezoning to the R3B multifamily zoning district. And it's not just the R3B zoning district that's a problem. I would say that the concept plan in front of you doesn't meet the criteria set forth in the St. Charles County Code for review of a concept plan and approval of a PUD. And if you take a look at my letter, and there are a number of criteria that you're supposed to look at in approving a PUD, approving a concept plan. And those were set forth in the staff report. And if you look at that staff report, it doesn't appear that this concept plan meets a single one of the criteria. And that's set forth in detail in my letter, but just to hit some of the highlights.
Tracy, I mean, I appreciate it. We want other people to have opportunities too, so please, you know.
I'll wrap it up.
Yeah.
I would
But-
like to give her a few minutes because it's a very complicated issue, Craig.
Okay.
Thank you, I
and
appreciate
understand that. But I'd like to ask questions too.
Well, so I'll just hit for you real quick. It doesn't satisfy any of the requirements of the concept plan review standards. It doesn't meet the master plan. There's nothing in the concept plan that actually guarantees or is binding that somehow natural, that the scenic beauty is going to be preserved, that the open spaces are going to be preserved. When you look at the staff report, you see a lot of stuff about, and you've heard a lot of stuff, they're aiming to remove as few trees and other scenic features as possible. They should be able to maintain adequate open space, and they're going to attempt to minimally grade. None of these are binding. And I want to hit again, there are significant safety concerns associated with the streets in terms of first responders being able to have access to the development. And a conflict, as I've already said, between the proposed development and the surrounding uses. So in short, not a single criterion is met. And again, we are asking that in addition to recommending denial of that R3B, you recommend denial of approval of that concept plan. And I'm more than happy to answer any questions you have.
So does anybody have questions for her? Gary?
No, I took a lot of notes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I didn't. I was reading your letter as we were going. Did everybody get this? All right.
Raise your right hand. You swear to tell the truth and nothing but the
Yes,
truth.
I do.
State your name and address for the record.
Ralph Fremer, 15026 Baxter Village Drive, Chesterfield, Missouri. I'm the CEO of TrailNet. We're an interesting organization, been around 30 years. We're not a bicycle-centric group. We're not a special interest group. We're a civic-oriented group that looks after the proper expenditure of infrastructure funds, among other things, as well as urban planning and narrative for the region, not just the St. Charles County, but the city and St. Louis County. You guys have done an amazing job of building infrastructure in St. Charles County. I think more than the allocation that I think is reasonable is wound up in St. Charles County as far as infrastructure, highways, created a grid system, lots of land available, lots of housing stock. It's been purposed in a way that has opened up the door for a lot of development, and I commend you on that. I don't think you need any more, but I'm going to tell you that anyway. The Katy Land Trust and TrailNet produce a magazine called Across STL, and what we try to do is promote the region in a new way of thinking, one that's more progressive, one that puts forth the idea that 30 years from now we're going to have something different to steward than today. The housing stock of today is not going to be what's going to be like 30 years from now. I don't know about golf, but I do know that a 20-foot street and two people walking on either side requires 3 feet on either side, or a bicycle. It just doesn't make sense to me. The proper use of, you've already made the investment in the infrastructure, you've got the grid system, fill in those gaps, we'd recommend you do that. Across STL will tell the story of how good you manage and steward this land from the front porch of the arch to the backyard of Katy Trail and Wine Country. This is a square peg and a round hole. I can't promote it. I can't tell the story of St. Louis, and that's a large part of what our work is. St. Louis is a region. I highly recommend that you deny this. Once it's done, you won't go back. I don't know if this is even a viable opportunity. I'm suspect that there's just not enough cash flow, therefore they're putting a lot of residents in this facility, shrinking everything down. It's very suspect. I commend them for putting together an interesting plan, but it doesn't fit. Thank you very much.
Raise your right hand. You swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth.
I do.
And state your name and address for the record.
Yeah, my name is Jay Doty. I live at 1706 Pine Hill Drive, De Pere, Missouri 63131. I'm a registered landscape architect. I'm a member of the Missouri Invasive Plant Task Force. I'm a conservationist for the Katy Land Trust, and I paddle kayaks on the Missouri River. Tonight I'm talking on behalf of the Katy Land Trust. The Katy Trail has become an internationally popular destination. That's obvious. There's over 150,000 people come out to travel this section to see the natural wonders of Missouri. They don't come out to see that trail. They come out to see the nature around that trail. Now, they come out to see places like the Missouri Bluffs. You don't put condos on the Gateway Arch, and you don't put homes on a 140-foot tall Missouri River bluff. That's all there is to it. The Missouri Bluff is a dry dolomite cliff. Okay, it's a distinct terrestrial community, natural community of Missouri. Dolomite is a soft sedimentary stone. If you approve the rezoning request, you'll be saying it is suitable for development, knowing you're giving your assent to potential for future tragedy, because cliffs do sometimes shed their faces, especially with new stresses from construction and compaction introduced from roadways. Now, what was shown in the plan and was offered by the staff was that they're 200 feet from the bluff. That's simply not true, okay? Even the drawings show that, the plans show the bluff is right on the property line, southernmost butt out. In fact, if you see the bluff right there, okay, that's the spot that jut out encompasses. Okay, so there's going to be homes. This is a view from the Daniel Boone Bridge. Okay, this is what people are going to see when they look that direction, except they're going to see that with a crest of homes across the top of it. And but you know, again, the concern of Katy Trail enthusiasts really starts with visual impacts. And you know, visual impacts within the environment. The visual impact of bluff-top development are not just experienced by the trail users, but there are 90,000 motorists that come across that Daniel Boone Bridge every single day. 90,000. Okay, so that's a lot of viewers. Okay, so again, this is a development that's not going to be built and then forgotten about. It's going to be a development that's built and seen and seen and seen by millions of people. Now, there is a reason why the county master plan calls for this area to be maintained as an open space. That's pretty obvious. And there is a reason why 30% slopes are deemed to be open space as a standard, but we're ignoring that. I look at the layout of the conceptual plan, and it makes the argument well that this is not a good site to build on. Okay, as a landscape architect, I've laid out sites like this many times. When you start putting in 20-foot roads, when you start having 45-foot radius cul-de-sacs, when you start having T's and Y intersections, and, basically what you're talking about is you're using those elements to try and cram more sites in there. That's why we've got 60-foot frontages, okay? Because we're trying to get as many sites as possible on this. And if you go with a wider road, you end up with fewer developments. Now, when they talk about 58 acres in the report, it says that 58 acres of trees would be removed due to the grading of the road and clearing of the home sites. That's incorrect. It's 58 acres strictly just for the roadways, not for the home pads whatsoever. So you can easily double that amount, make that more like 120 acres of trees that will be removed. But even that is questionable because, again, like my colleague, I went out there and I walked the bluff, I walked the Katy Trail, I walked out on the Daniel Boone Bridge, I walked on top of the bluff, I stood on that same point that he did and looked down on the wetland that's right there. And the one thing that you notice in that woodland is that it's a dying woodland, okay? It is dying. There are over several 100,000 invasive bush honeysuckle throughout that woodland. It has not been well maintained. There is not good stewardship currently going on at that site. And so it doesn't matter how many native plants homeowners put in there, that woodland is in the process of dying. Because what happens is honeysuckle takes over, shades out everything. It's an allelopathic plant that puts toxic chemicals into the soil. It prevents the oak and hickory seedlings from coming up. And so what you're seeing is the existing trees that are out there, that's all that's going to come up. Okay, so that's a problem that doesn't necessarily weigh on the future development, I understand. And but it is something that, it is going to have a major impact on any development out there. And, if we really value this as open space, something needs to be done that reflects that. Now, in most development processes, the focus is on what happens within the property lines. You look at the site, okay? This is one site where I would beg to differ that you can't, as a planning and zoning commission, look just at the plan, okay? It's not just a piece of paper. These plans just don't give you the impact of these bluffs, of that terrain, of the wetlands that sit down just below it, of the riparian corridor along the Missouri River, of the river corridor itself. You need to look at this in a broader picture. And so, obviously, the Katy Land Trust would ask that you, by the arguments of Tracy Papillo and mine, that you would reject both the zoning and the PUD. That's all I have to say. Any questions?
No, thank you.
Thank you.
You might want to turn that.
Yeah.
There you go. Just raise your right hand. You swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
And state your name and address for the record?
Emily Eschbacher, 7701 Forsyth Boulevard, Suite 500, Clayton, Missouri, 63105.
Go ahead, Emily.
I'm actually going to throw a different one up there. Okay. Good evening, Chairman, members of the Commission. My name is Emily Eschbacher. I'm an attorney with Lathrop Gage, and I'm here on behalf of the trustees of Weldon Spring Heights. They've asked me to speak on their behalf regarding the proposed development. They are in opposition to it. Tracy very eloquently stated several of the reasons why the residents are concerned. There are also residents here who are speaking, and I understand due to time that several will not be, so I would just like to ask the residents to raise their hands and show. There we go. So since Tracy has already stated several of the reasons, I'm going to, per the chairman's request, to speak on a different matter. The village of Weldon Spring Heights was built, the last home was built about 30 years ago, and around the same time, the research park was put into play. This has created several traffic concerns already. I understand with the expansion of the Nike plant, that adds an additional 400 jobs, which is great for development, for economic development. But that adds an additional 800 trips, give or take, a day. And then with the addition of the 3,737 trips that will be added, there are huge safety concerns regarding the use of Research Park Drive, which is only a 2-lane road and has not been updated to address traffic concerns that were brought about by both the golf course and the research park. So we're dealing with a very real public safety issue here. Several residents have been T-boned trying to exit Weldon Springs Heights onto Research Park Drive. There have been several near misses. I understand that they pulled a traffic report, but those are just reported accidents. Those don't report the near misses. This picture shows the line of sight when you are leaving Weldon Springs Heights. If you look, to the east, there's westbound traffic coming out of the industrial park. The line of sight is nearly non-existent due to the grade change and the sharp curve that makes it impossible to see traffic until it's literally on top of you. Add to the mix that there are often very large delivery trucks leaving the industrial park, headed for 94 or the interstate, and this can get extremely dangerous. The village of Weldon Spring Heights is not thrilled with the continued development of what is supposed to be conservation land with this industrial park, and then a golf course, and now single-family homes and multifamily homes. Public safety needs to come before a private developer's profits. The village of Weldon Spring Heights respectfully request that the development not be allowed to proceed, at least not without some significant improvements being made to Research Park Drive, which would be one of the access points for this new development. As Chairman Griffin had suggested, we need to see a traffic study. More evidence is needed of the impact. Stoplights would be a great addition. A roundabout, a 3-way stop sign. There is a stop sign that is, you can't see it on the picture. It's only about 4 feet tall, and people just blow right past it all the time. Our comments and concerns are not primarily anti-development, but they are pro-safety. The village of Weldon Spring Heights should not have to bear the brunt of the safety issues caused by non-research development on conservation land. Any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, gentlemen. Greg Kelly. Yes.
Swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth.
Yes, sir.
And state your name and address for the record.
Greg Kelly, 7 Weldon Spring Heights Drive, Weldon Spring, Missouri.
Go ahead, Greg.
Okay. First of all, thank you, gentlemen, very much. I know it's been a long night for everyone. I'll try to keep things short and not overlap anyone else. And, thank you, Mr. Goss. I know it's hard to get up and speak like this for 2 hours. I'm an attorney myself. Had to do it. It's not fun. I do want to commend you guys on putting so much effort into this plan. It's obvious that, I do believe, Mr. Goss, 3 years, probably 6 figures worth of money went into developing this plan. And I think that's great for us as a community and you guys as a commission, because I think we can finally close the door on putting a development on this river bluff, because I think 3 years worth of that kind of time and effort and money has only shown us that it gets you a residential development, that the only way it's feasible to make it work is to make it high density, make it dangerous, and you make it so nobody wants it. How many people here are actually here? Where's the line of folks that are supporting this development? I'd like to know how many letters, how many emails were sent that were supporting it. We have extreme amount of environmental concerns. There's some folks here that are going to kind of speak to that and with a little more authority than I have. But there's a couple things that I'd like to say just based on Mr. Goss's presentation that You know, I kept hearing $11 million investment over and over again. Unfortunately, the global economy and doesn't really care about a private company's $11 million investment. Every year for the last decade, more golf courses have closed than opened in the United States. Golf is a sport that is not growing, okay? It's, in my opinion, highly unlikely that this golf course is going to continue to be a golf course throughout the remainder of this 99-year lease. I don't know if you agree with me or not, but it's something to think about. Also, the development time frame for this, 12 years worth of development. You know, what happens if we have another economic downturn? Here's a question. If it's only, you know, makes sense from an economic standpoint to develop it at this high density, you know, we have a global economic downturn, this developer goes under, this, you know, developer, you know, everything slows down. You know, it's not going to be financially feasible for other developers to come in here and piecemeal build out this project. We're going to have a half blown up bluff that isn't cost effective to develop. I mean, I think this plan only works if you do it at this density. And there's been no discussion at all about, I haven't heard the word wildlife once, okay? And what I have actually here, I mean, I just spent a few minutes, you know, on the internet, but I have a MoDOT report from when the Daniel Boone Bridge expansion took place that shows that this river bluff here is home to bald eagles and the Indiana bat, which is actually an endangered species. I have copies of this report if anyone would like it. I didn't see anything mentioned about wildlife in the staff report either, but I can tell you as a resident of Weldon Spring Heights, we have great wildlife. We have the best wildlife. We have herds of deer running through our yard. We have eagles that we see. We have coyotes. We have, I thought it was a mountain lion. My wife says I'm crazy, but I thought I saw a mountain lion. And this is all connected, okay? And, you know, we are already feeling the effects of that Nike expansion, okay? And we're trying to work through that. We're trying to be good neighbors. But the amount of traffic, like Emily alluded to, that this development is going to cause us to an already dangerous intersection. I am one of the residents who saw one of our residents get, you know, hit like in a T-bone fashion. It was in September. Luckily, she was fine. But I did see the accident. You know, a couple nights ago, my wife and I were out walking at 5 o'clock, and a semi-tractor trailer truck blows right through the stop sign. I mean, there's just, the road that was built there 30 years ago was not designed for light manufacturing, golf course, hotel, and a high-density residential development. And then, you know, I feel like I can probably stop there.
Thank you.
Yes.
Raise your right hand. You swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth.
I do.
And you state your name and address for the record.
My name's Steve Highcamp at number 37, Weldon Spring Heights.
Go ahead, Steve.
Okay, so what I have here, I have some reports for you here. This is pretty hard to see here, but I inserted their drawing into AutoCAD, and I had the following to report.
Are you an engineer or something? Or-
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so this is a typical section of a roadway. I took an example, a street in there, and so those are cut and fills, okay? So if you have a 30-foot right-of-way, 15-foot building line, so you're up to 60. Add the building pad, that's another 50-50. You're 200 feet wide and a swath of cutting trees, okay? And in this report, you can look at all this. This is a partial street section on this map from about here to about there, okay? So to highlight what kind of damage you're going to do, so the main road thoroughfare, this road, well, that's an old plan. Okay, there's a road A. That road is 2.8 miles long with a template width of 200, 67 acres of clearing. Road A's, B, C, D, E, F, G, M, 106 acres of clearing. The approximate cubic yards of excavation, 1,125,000 yards. Of that, 375,000 will be shot with dynamite. Okay, so they're going to blow up all the ridges. So you figure there's 107 acres of tree clearing, figure 12 mature trees for 100 by 100-foot area. That equals 5,595 trees that are coming down, guys. This plan is a total devastation of nature. So hopefully you'll agree with these findings. And this land is really not meant to be developed in this way. As a matter of fact, it's not really meant to be developed. And for all the habitants in the woods, they need to have some respect. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
And state your name and address for the record.
My name is John McFeeters, 4605 Olive Street, St. Louis, Missouri. I am a board member of the Katy Land Trust and one of the co-founders of Magnificent Missouri. And I will try and be very brief. I'm just going to hit a few highlights, so many of which have already been addressed, but this plan has many significant legal issues with the spot zoning, the fact that it doesn't conform to the master plan and the master plan concepts of open, that it should remain primarily an open space agricultural use, its proximity to the bush wildlife area, and use as parks and open space land.
John, are you an attorney too?
I'm not an attorney.
Okay, all right.
I just sometimes pretend to be one.
Okay.
I'm actually in the nursery business, and I've done some real estate development myself,
Okay.
Which I will segue into. If this development was in the jurisdiction of the Metropolitan Sewer District, the concerns with stormwater runoff would preclude the kind of development that's happening here. The notion that the developers are going to slope the roads, not capture any of the stormwater that runs off the roads. They're simply going to direct it into these streams, that they have carefully avoided grading disturbance, but they have not accounted, to my knowledge, in their presentation for any of the issues that will be exaggerated by the additional stormwater that will run into these streams directly into the Missouri River, exaggerating flooding downstream, an issue that I think everybody in St. Charles County is aware of. That we are having increasing flood issues downstream, or increasing flood issues throughout the entire area. This will not help that issue. I think there's some issues with the visual impact. They've discussed very cogently that it may not be visible from most of the Katy Trail, but it will be very visible, I think, from parts of Interstate 64, particularly when you're approaching the bridge from St. Louis County. I think there will be issues. I think it will be practically impossible for them to keep it so you don't see any of this development. Magnificent Missouri and the Katy Land Trust are dedicated to preserving natural beauty and the natural communities in the state of Missouri, and particularly along the Missouri River in the St. Charles County area out and on out to Herman. And we've held many meetings to try and foster the cooperation between the different towns and communities along the Missouri River to promote tourism throughout this area. This plan would be the first step towards the possibility of future similar high-density development along the Missouri River that would be detrimental to the Katy Land Trust, excuse me, not the Katy Land Trust, but the Katy Trail, and to tourism in St. Charles County. All of you, I think, have acknowledged the value of the Katy Trail. This is just a step in the wrong direction. It's a step that takes your county and your community, in my opinion, down a path that you would be ill-advised to pursue. So I recommend, or not recommend, I encourage you to deny both aspects of the rezoning and the planned unit development for this project.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Raise your right hand. You swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth.
I do.
And state your name and address for the record.
Christopher Donahoe. I live at 31 Weldon Spring Heights Drive, Weldon Spring Heights.
Christopher.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for letting us have this opportunity. I've lived in the Heights for 31 years. My wife grew up in the Heights. When we first moved there were cattle and cornfields where the research park is now and the golf course. Beautiful, beautiful woodlands, wildlife, trails. Today, we've got a manufacturing park. Okay, don't kid ourselves. It's not research, okay? That's what we were sold back in '85. You weren't on the board probably at the time, so hey, you can't take credit for that, guy, so don't worry about that. You're the stewards of the county. This is an atrocious proposal for development of bluffs. It's not a subdivision development. Come out to Weldon Spring, walk it. Go to the actual land and walk it. Have you done that?
I have.
Okay. So you know, it's extreme topology, challenging to build on, dangerous roads, skinny roads, as I heard, people to walk down steep roads, school buses, UPS. You have to ask yourselves, is that safe? And to prove this, you're going to live with that decision. Any questions?
Thank you. Raise your right hand. You swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth.
I do.
State your name and address for the record.
Okay, my name is Mike Wallace. I live at 19 Weldon Spring Heights Drive, Weldon Spring Heights, Missouri.
Go ahead, Mike.
Zip code 63304. Okay, I naturally wish that you do vote this down, but I think while you're considering, I have one more question that nobody's addressed, was most houses in Missouri have basements. The bluffs are rocks, right? They've remained stable for eons, long before we came here. So those are rocks underneath that ground. So are they going to build these houses without basements? And if that's the case, then you're looking at a real low resale value down the future because people want basements in their houses. And if they do put basements in their houses, they're going to blast them with dynamite? Is that going to, and what does that do to the bluffs? And I think that's a question we're asking.
We'll ask them.
Okay. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you. You swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth.
I do.
And state your name and address for the record.
Steve Culver, Wolfram Road, 63304.
Go ahead, Steve.
I'm the only one on that side of the highway, so I thought I'd address it. Your neighbor. Matter of fact, going down that 12% grade, you've almost hit me. Rather speedy there. I've lived out there, well, all my life. My residence has been there for 40-plus years. And in that time, I saw the conservation area become the research park, become the industrial park, become the golf course. The county saved us by going in and making them pay taxes. The tax-free part was actually abhorrent. It was tragic that they got away with that. But thank you. And I'm hoping you use that same kind of enforcement with this, because this is a city. This is bigger than Weldon Spring Heights. And thank you, Weldon Spring Heights. I'm sorry my town did not file a remonstrance. I find that, you know, the impact that this is going to have on this area is devastating. I've lived with the development by the same company, same group, in Whitmore, Camelot. Both of them were filled with a lot of promises that never delivered. Both of them created safety problems. Both of them created high impact on our schools, on our people around the area, the wildlife. This is not a friendly organization. They'll come in and create exclusive areas that will not enhance the communities. That's it.
Thank you. Sir, are you planning to speak too, back there?
Yeah, here.
No, I'm sorry, hold on. Are you planning to speak too? Why don't you come up? So I know where we're at.
Good evening. My name's Carl Day. I live at...
Sorry, sir.
Oh.
I'm sorry, you gotta raise your right hand. You swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
State your name and address for the record.
Carl Wayne Day, number 8, Weldon Spring Heights Drive.
Go ahead, Carl.
Yes, I came to speak on behalf to try to discourage, approve this rezoning. So, my family has been in the Heights since it became a town in 1950. My father-in-law was one of the original occupants of the town, my wife, and then we've been there most of our lives. I'm here to say that, you know, I'd heard something earlier tonight from the Zoltec representative. I'm not sure, but he stated something that, you know, I thought was interesting. He stated he had 24 hours a day noise from trucks. Did I hear that?
Mm-hmm.
You know, the Heights has had complaints on record ever since the research park has been in, dealing with noise complaints, smell complaints, and traffic thing is something that we've noticed a lot more lately, and it has been a really concern, and that was my main concern. But the previous person spoke or said that was going to say the same thing I was telling you. The expansion of Nike is going to have it's going to increase traffic. The 80,000 square foot expansion of Nike, this development, and what we have already, which is certain times of day, it's very difficult, and I don't know if everybody, this all is crossing our town's property. So, I don't know. So, I don't know if that has been considered. So,
It has.
that's all I need to say, and I'm against it, so.
Thank you. Do you swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
State your name and address for the record.
Richard Dan, 10 Weldon Spring Heights Drive, Weldon Spring, Missouri, 63304.
Go ahead, Richard.
Most of the topics that have been talked about, I'm just going to add a little bit more to them. The safety issue with the roads going into the Weldon Spring Heights Research Park area and Weldon Spring Heights are significant. What I don't think was said is that it's a two-way stop at Research Park Drive and Weldon Spring Heights Drive intersection. So trucks and cars coming out of the research park don't have to, or they do have to stop. Stuff going in doesn't have to stop. So that's a significant safety issue right there. The other one is, I don't know if you've been on the Research Park Road at 7 in the morning during the school year. Okay? You get out to 94 and you're in it already at 7 o'clock. If you're going to turn left, you just can't. Now you're adding a ton more traffic to that intersection. It's just going to be a safety nightmare. So I don't know. It's not good. And there's only two entrances right now. One is the 94 Research Park Drive, and the other one is the Research Park Circle. Good luck. Good luck, so. The other thing is, we did mention wildlife, and it's just beautiful to watch 21 deer cross the street. Until you see that in your neighborhood and appreciate it, all that will be gone. That habitat will go away. And I don't think that's something we want to do to the Katy Trail, the conservation areas, any of that around here. So I just want to let you know, I'm opposed to the development. And that's all I got to say.
Thank you. All right, we're going to go ahead and close the public portion, and I'm going to take a break. So 5 minutes. If you don't need to get out, don't leave, because I want to get started as soon as we get back, but I do need to take a break. I do too. I'm waiting all the time out.
Go for me. I don't want to.
I can still work here.
Well, don't drink the water. Don't drink the water.
Okay, let's try it again. Welcome to the December 20th, 2017 Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. At this time, I would request that everyone please turn off your electronic devices and stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Applications for rezoning and concept plans heard during tonight's meeting will be voted on by the Planning and Zoning Commission. The Commission will then take a recommendation of applications, which will be submitted to the St. Charles County Council for their final decision. The individual items and bills for this evening's application are scheduled to be introduced at the Monday, January 8, 2018 County Council meeting. Applications for preliminary plat heard during tonight's meeting will also be voted on by the Planning and Zoning Commission during the meeting. The vote on preliminary plats is final. Only a recommendation for denial of a preliminary plat would be heard before the County Council. The following documents are introduced as a matter of record for this evening's public hearing and regular meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission. The Unified Development Ordinance of St. Charles County, including zoning maps. The year 2025 Master Plan for St. Charles County, which includes the year 2025 Future Land Use Plan map. Everyone, oh, yeah, okay. So I'm going to give you a little. Okay, let's try it again. Welcome to the December 20th, 2017 Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. At this time, I would request that everyone please turn off your electronic devices and stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Applications for rezoning and concept plans heard during tonight's meeting will be voted on by the Planning and Zoning Commission. The Commission will then take a recommendation of applications, which will be submitted to the St. Charles County Council for their final decision. The individual items and bills for this evening's application are scheduled to be introduced at the Monday, January 8, 2018 County Council. I'm giving them time. Here they come.
Another one? Thank you.
It's my fault.
Yes.
Mr. Goss, if you want to come back up, gentlemen. Let's go ahead and call the meeting back to order. Sheila, are you ready? Okay, thank you. So you've heard the concerns and questions. Give you an opportunity to address those and see what you can come up with.
What I'd like to request, Mr. Chairman, the hour is late. It is 10:15 or 10:20. And there have been a lot of questions raised. I think one of the things that is clear to me is that we need to come back with more detailed traffic information. I think that was a request as made during my remarks that we come back with a traffic study that directly addresses those questions. I think I had addressed most of the remarks before. I don't want to go back through a point counterpoint. I think that's kind of a waste of time. I do think there's additional information we need to bring back to this commission, particularly with respect to traffic. If there are other items that the commission particularly wants me to address, we're going to have a conversation about some houses and that thing, but I think that's kind of a detail item. I think we need to give some more information with respect to stormwater, explain a little bit more about that, because I don't think we've been as clear about that as some folks. Just, that's a sense I get from the comments. And then, you know, we certainly, I want to address whatever questions the commission has. But I think in terms of me responding in that kind of debate fashion, I don't think it's productive. I do think we need to give you some more information. I would like the opportunity to do that.
So are you asking, well, I'm going to see if there's any questions of staff or, I mean, of the commission. Do you guys want to ask, or you?
I get the floor? Yeah, in the specific regard amongst us here is why do we have to have the R3B?
Sure.
And the idea that it's going from 5 acres down to 20 houses on an acre seems rather a drastic step. And also the fact that we got this attorney up here, and I was reading before, she was talking about the Uniform Development Ordinance and spot zoning. And if you don't have a copy of her letter, I'm sure furnish one, but she raises some good points. So you might address them if you come back.
I can address those tonight. It's not spot zoning. This rezoning request, as the staff has noted, meets some significant objectives with respect to things that the county wants. It is something that provides a varied type of housing as part of the development, which is precisely the point of your planned unit development. It does a fantastic job of preserving the natural environment as part of the development, which is one of the criteria of your planned unit development ordinance. And in terms of it being a benefit, it adds a component of housing next to the research park, which is indeed what good planning would have you do. And so I'm comfortable that we are well within the legal requirements. Had the staff believed that we weren't, I believe the staff would have made a negative recommendation. That's been my experience, that the staff would have said there was a problem with that. As it relates to the R3B and why we are requesting that is because of the way your code is set up. If I were in a couple of other communities, and I'm not, but if I were in Wentzville, for example, the way their code is, they have a planned development category. I ask for that. I don't have to worry about underlying zones and all that kind of stuff. That's just not the way your code's set up. Your code's set up to say, okay, what are the uses you want? Pick a zoning category that allows those uses. That's your base category. And then put a plan on it. It's the plan that matters, because we aren't going to have 20 units per acre. We're not going to have high density. We can't. Our density is 1 unit per acre. That's our density. And by anyone's definition, that is low density. That's our plan. That's what your code requires that we follow. We can't change that. And if we come back in with something that's different, well, it'll be rejected out of hand, because we have to follow the plan that you approve. So that's the way your code's set up. So what we were looking at with R3B was it allowed us to do cluster homes, it allowed us to do villas, and allowed us to do apartments and condominiums. Those were the multifamily uses that we wanted to be able to place in the development, which again was part of the objective of your PUD ordinance, which talks about having different kinds of housing in a development, a different mix. That's why we chose it. Now, if your PUD ordinance allowed me to simply select uses and limit it in that manner, trust me, I would have done it. Because we have absolutely no desire to develop to the standards of R3B, and you know that.
Okay, Brad.
Because we gave you a plan like that.
Mr. Goss, thank you.
Right,
Thank you.
thank you.
I appreciate it. Go ahead, Mr. Klinghammer.
I have one, just.
Hold on, Mr. Griffin. Mr. Klinghammer is going to ask a question. Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate your willingness to come back. I'm going to make a motion here momentarily to table this to allow that to occur. Some of the other things I'd like you to address when you come back, not tonight.
I understand. I'm not going to say anything. I'm just taking notes.
I thought the attorneys for Zoltec did a very good job of talking about the discharge and the water runoff from their place, and how the runoff would affect the houses here, as well as the noise and everything else that's there. One of the biggest things that we always have to address is that conflict between residents and light industrial. You've been in the game long enough. You know that we spend an awful lot of time doing that.
Right.
And we certainly don't want to purposely put that into a plan that has that kind of conflict. So when you come back, address those other things that we've talked about and add that to the list as well.
Okay.
And, with that, I'll make a motion.
I just have
You
one.
have the sewer plant to that also, to your comment?
One, before you make the motion, is the attorney for Blitz, he mentioned, and also Robert Meyer at the onset, if this is passed as an R3B overlay, and let's say everything went south, and I understand that, Mike, you would be able to rescind the overlay. So then what's left is still the R3B zoning. Is that correct?
I think what Robert told us was that we could change the zoning back to the agricultural again.
I understood there was, once the overlay's lifted, it stays in an R3B forever.
No, we heard conflicting from another attorney, but we have the power we, meaning the council, has the power to change it back again.
Change it back.
Yeah, I would certainly defer to the county councilor on that.
The ordinance speaks to specifically getting rid of the PUD component. There's no question, though, that the county council can move to change the R3B zoning.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Well, while I have the mic, let me just ask that the
Another attorney on the mic.
if the motion could use the word continue the public hearing rather than table.
Okay.
Thank you for
that'll
that
fit in
clarification.
nicely to some.
You're absolutely correct.
Yeah.
With that, I'll make a motion to continue the hearing
I'll second.
until our next regular scheduled meeting.
Was that you, Mr. Griffin, that seconded it? Mr. Griffin, did you second that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, this is a complicated one. I think that we owe
Yeah.
it to the developer as well as the community at large, the surrounding neighbors, that we need to make sure that we make the right decision on this.
I was going to also suggest to the other council members, I've been on this for 14 years, this is probably the most complicated and biggest impact thing I've ever heard since I've sat on this P&Z. I would suggest, and I know people don't like, they have their other lives, but before the next meeting, maybe we can email one another and find a time that we could meet and go over some of these before that. Is that
Nope,
possible?
can't do that.
You would have a
It's a
problem with
meeting,
that.
yeah.
Yeah, that's.
No, we're not doing that. I appreciate that, if you want us to do that. Woo! See a lot of problems there.
Did you feel the ice bucket there?
Yes, I did. I felt a chill run down my shirt. Anyway, we're going to go ahead and take a vote on this. I appreciate you guys' comments. Mr. Ellis, how do you vote on the continuing of this?
Yes.
Mr. Fromm says yes. Mr. Cleary?
Yes.
Mr. Leonard?
Yes.
Mr. Kuhn?
Yes.
Mr. McDonald?
Yes.
Mr. Klinghammer?
Yes.
Mr. Setley?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
No. Yes.
I checked both boxes now. Are you a yes?
Yes.
Okay. And Mr. McBride?
Yes.
10-0. Thank you. And thank you for your patience, everybody. I do appreciate it. You'll get notification on the next meeting on this. Not sure exactly how that's going to go. I guess it's the next meeting, probably.
Well, we said, since we continued it, do we have to send out another notification?
Do we? We don't? So just count on coming to the next meeting. And check
When is that next meeting?
Check on the agenda on the county website. And if you're not sure, call our staff, and they'll let you know what's going on with that. Thank you. Thank you very much for your patience.
I thought we were done.
So when we continue on to the next one. And I'm sorry, guys, we still have a meeting to conduct. We want to go ahead and we got one more thing on the agenda, so if you can clear the room and not discuss, you can get out in the hall, that would be great.
3 5
We'd like to go home to our kids and family and.
acre
I'm
lot.
sure they're looking forward to seeing us.
Yes, they are, especially at 11 o'clock at night. All right, we're going to go ahead and move on to the next
All in favor, say aye.
preliminary plat, 17-12, property owners Rodney A. Jones and Patricia S. Jones, and Danny Klimmer and Jill Klimmer. Bax Engineering is the engineer on the property. The property zoning is A agricultural, 5-acre minimum lot size, and the area is 15.539 acres. Number of lots are 3. The location is on the south side, is on the south and west side of Forestell Ridge Court, approximately 750 feet south of Forestell Road, and it's in Council District 2. Staff, do you want to give anything, or do you want to just? Go ahead.
Well, basically, this is a 2-acre lots right now that amount to about 15 and a half acres. The one lot is actually less than 10 acres, so they will have to take a little bit from the other lot in order to meet the 5-acre minimum lot size. Staff is recommending approval as it stands. There's no letters. And we have finished reviewing the preliminary plat with no other further comments.
Okay. Any questions for staff? Seeing none, the applicant's up here. Everyone raise your right hand. You swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
State your name and address for the record, please.
Jessica Hargrave with Bax Engineering, 221 Point West Boulevard, St. Charles, 63301.
Sorry you had to stay all night.
That's okay. I live up in Troy, so I got an hour drive
Oh,
home.
wow. Nice.
So
go ahead.
I'm here with Forestell Ridge. We're taking 2 lots and now turning it into 3. They all do meet the minimum 5 acres. They do all meet the minimum lot width at the building line of 150 feet. And if you guys have any questions, I'm here to answer them. I'm sorry? No, no golf course. We're good.
Any questions for Jessica?
I move we approve preliminary plat 17-12.
I second it.
Second.
I third it.
Mr. Leonard?
Yes.
Mr. Fromm, yes. Mr. Kuhn?
Yes.
Mr. McDonald?
Yes.
Mr. Klinghammer?
Yes.
Mr. Setley?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mr. McBride?
Yes.
Mr. Ellis?
Yes.
And Mr. Cleary?
Yes.
10-0. Thank you, gentlemen.
Well, I'd like to say that this has been a memorable experience, my first time at a county council meeting.
Well, it's not county council. Wait to go to those. Those are really fun.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, playing zoning.
All right.
we have fun there, too.
Motion, anything on old business?
Motion to approve the minutes.
Approve, I got to approve the minutes. Thank you.
Approve the minutes.
And we have a motion and a second, please.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you.
Make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Wow.